Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Monday night felt great for the four in charge of Crow's Marauders. They'd already had a hard day with a morning of potions followed by an afternoon that contained both runes and defense. But this actually seemed more like fun than work. They were running the club members through their paces, just revising on what they had done last year. The revision was for two reasons, mostly so they could see that their students hadn't forgotten everything over the summer, but also to give their new staff sponsor and four assistants a first glimpse of just what they had let themselves in for. Henrika had decided she would help the four prefects with the new first-year club. Tuesday evening suited her timetable better too, and she'd already covered all the material with the Crows. Their new sponsor, Sirius, was looking rather flabbergasted at what these students were able to achieve, while Susan, Terry, Blaze, and Daphne appeared worried that they had perhaps bitten off more than they could chew. Susan and Blaze at least had the experience of watching their four friends train, but they had no idea just how advanced these first years were. Susan was definitely going to mention this to her aunt in the next letter home. The head of the DMLA would be thrilled. They ended the lesson in their usual manner, everyone sitting round and discussing what they'd just done before learning about the material that would be coming up in the next few weeks. As the stream of happy students headed out the door, the four were then faced with a seriously happy Sirius. "Now I understand the smirk my wife has been wearing all day. She knew what I'd be seeing tonight. All I can say is that was bloody fantastic, and I might steal a few of your ideas for my own classes. That 5 minutes at the end allowed you to see that they understood everything you'd taught them." Hermione was mostly responsible for the academic input into each lesson. She gave Sirius their reasoning behind that idea. "We don't work with textbooks or give homework. This is the best way for us to see if they understood it. You're welcome to use it. It's what Professor Weasley does with us after every session. We just adapted his method to suit a much bigger class." Daphne felt she had to say something. She then managed to express the views of her three cohorts perfectly. "And guys, don't take this the wrong way, but why do you need us? You control that lesson perfectly, and those second years aren't that far behind us in defense. They will probably be ahead by the end of the year. How are we supposed to help when they'll know more than we do?" Seeing the genuine concern on all four of their friends' faces, Padma tried to reassure them, but it was easy, as this was all stuff they had done before. "When we're teaching them something new, we need eyes in the back of our heads, and extra pairs of hands. That's where you come in. We'll work two to a group, and that allows twice as many members to attempt the spells." Terry was still concerned, though. "That doesn't answer what happens when they know more than us. How can we help if we can't cast the spells that they're attempting?" Neville had always felt he was the slowest in their group. Not that this would be considered a bad thing when taking into account who the other three in that group were. It gave him an insight, though, into what their friends were feeling. What if we spent some time after every meeting making sure everyone was comfortable casting whatever we were going to be working on the following week? This was greeted as a great idea, though. Blaze brought up a potential problem. "That could see us in here until past curfew. I want to help, but not if it's costing me house points and detentions. Which is why we have a staff sponsor." Harry indicated towards Sirius before continuing. "Professor Black can deal with that. No prefect or professor will take house points if we have a pass signed by him. I can do better than that. I'll take your concerns to McGonagall and get your curfew extended. Only for Mondays, mind you." Hermione then rhymed off the spells they would be teaching the club between now and Halloween, knowing that they had all learned them in their normal defense class. With their concerns now quashed, the enthusiasm to be involved in this venture began to shine through from their friends. Harry assigning them partners just made it more real. "Daphne, you'll be working with me. Blaze, you're alongside Hermione. Susan, you and Neville will make a good team, leaving Terry and Padma as our remaining pair." We very deliberately continually shuffle the groups. Not wanting to replace house rivalries with "my group is better than yours," but find it better to keep the teaching pairs the same. It had been a good meeting, and all involved were now looking forward to the next one. They were not looking forward to this. It was Wednesday lunchtime, and no one would tell them who their new defense tutor was. All they had managed to ascertain was that this new tutor was definitely not Bill Weasley or Remus Lupin. That was all either of their current tutors would say on the matter. Hermione was still trying to guess right up until the great hall doors theatrically banged wide open and a scary figure stood there. All the friends made it a point of trying to have lunch together, and Susan of course recognized the figure instantly. "What's Mad-Eye Moody doing in Hogwarts?" "Oh shit, I think that's your new tutor, guys. Good luck, you're gonna need it." Moody decided everyone must have had a good look at him by now, so bellowed the length of the great hall. "I'm here to train 4 students on how to kill Death Eaters. I want to see these 4 in front of me now." In the silence that followed, the entire hall heard Padma's whine. "But I've just sat down. I haven't had my lunch yet." Harry cringed, knowing this was exactly the reaction this person was looking for. His years of training with Master RobSt allowed him to spot the similarities. He expected a tirade to follow that remark and wasn't disappointed. "Little girl, do you think that line will work on Death Eaters?" A little girl's whine coming from this scarred and wizened old Aurora was really freaky and at the same time frightening too. "Oh please, Mr. Big Bad Death Eater, I haven't had my lunch yet. Could you come back later? I'll be ready to fight then." After that, Moody's own voice seemed gruffer than ever. "These murdering scum will kill you in a second, if you're lucky. They'll probably choose the time and place, and the cowards always try to stack the odds in their favor. I'm here to help you turn those odds to your advantage. But if you would rather finish your lunch..." Neville was on his feet as this old geezer made his betrothed look a fool. Harry's hand, though, was on his arm. "That's exactly what he wants, Neville. To needle you so you end up fighting on his terms and by his rules. We've been taught to be better than that." The 4 were now moving toward their latest tutor. But even that wasn't enough to please him. "I thought you 4 wanted to learn? If I don't see some enthusiasm soon, then I might just go back to the ministry. I'll probably do that anyway after I see just how pathetic you lot are. And we'll probably let you then hire someone who doesn't leave part of himself behind every time he gets into a fight. Your appearance hardly inspires confidence in your defense abilities. Far less does anything for your capability to pass whatever knowledge you have on to others." Hermione's retort had the hall holding its breath, waiting to see what reaction it would generate. Mad-Eye roaring with laughter wasn't in anyone's top 5 of guesses. "Oh, you have spirit, Missy. I'll enjoy breaking it. Now move and show me this training room I've heard so much about." The quartet broke into a jog. Leaving their new tutor behind allowed them a little time to plan. "He'll try to antagonize us, hoping for reactions. We need to stay focused and hope he underestimates us. He's also on our patch. Hogwarts can help, and that will certainly be something he won't expect." They all started adding to Harry's outline, forming a plan of attack as they ran. "He doesn't look too mobile. We want some rough terrain. Cover would also be good. Let us try and pin him down. That's an artificial foot, and probably leg too. Some sand would certainly slow him down." As Moody pushed open the door, he thought some bastard had tampered with his hip flask. He had to be hallucinating, because this just couldn't be real. His peg leg sinking into the sand, though, told him otherwise. The scene looked like part of a ruined ancient village that the desert was slowly reclaiming, and there was no sign of his new students anywhere. They were definitely here, though. Granger's voice was echoing all around him. "Okay, old man, show us what you got and you just might get the job." That she'd cast that charm on her voice so he wouldn't know where it was coming from had a wide grin forming on Moody's face. He had a feeling he was going to like these kids. "Amelia, I feckin' love those kids. By the time they come of age, you'll need at least 20 good auras to have any hope of taking them down." He took another hit from his flask before continuing. "My only problem is I've got them again tomorrow morning and I ain't as young as I used to be. Bloody wore me out, they did." The head of the DMLA had rarely seen the Master Aura so impressed, though she too had watched them train. They were sitting in her office and both had known each other far too long to stand on ceremony when there was no need to. She immediately voiced her concerns. "I hope you didn't hurt any of them." The wicked smile on that battered face had her worried, though needlessly. "Amelia, I had to raise my level of spells 3 times. You know the best bit, they raised theirs right back at me. Those 2 girls are scarily clever, powerful too. Longbottom also has power to spare, along with loyalty that would put a Hufflepuff to shame. Crow though, that lad is on a whole different level. That goblin he calls father is one sneaky bastard. Crow seems to have learned to be the same on his father's knee. He's so feckin' sneaky he convinced that old hat to put him in Ravenclaw, the mark of a true Slytherin. When he whips out that sword though, Merlin, give me a few years with them and old Tommy Boy's ass is toast. Moody being optimistic was hard to believe, but this was totally unexpected. He seemed so positive too. Do you really think so, Alastor? They took me down, Amelia. When have raw recruits ever done that? Amelia was left sitting with her mouth hanging open. Alastor Moody was a legend that even her year group hadn't been able to get the better of. That 4 students just into their teens managed that feat was staggering. Of course I was holding back, but I got the distinct feeling Crow was doing the same. If that boy ever really lets go, I wouldn't want to be on the other side of him. She still couldn't believe what she'd just heard. They took you down? How the hell did they manage that? By using their minds as well as their magic, and don't forget those blades. They used every advantage they had and ran me ragged. I could see what they were doing, but couldn't really stop them. Not without seriously injuring at least one of them, that is. They also seemed to know that a training exercise is different from a real fight. I will certainly be buying Arthur's boy a drink. Bill Weasley is a feckin' genius to have them working together like that. If all the students left Hogwarts as well taught as those 4, we wouldn't need an aura training program couple of months to learn the lore and just throw them out there. They would be ready. His good eye was almost tearing up as he paid the 4 students his highest compliment. I don't even have to install constant vigilance into them. Those kids watch each other's backs at all times. I kept trying to isolate one of them, but the other 3 would be on me in a flash. Any time I thought I had them, walls would suddenly appear out the floor and I would be foiled again. Those 4 could beat Voldemort right now if he was stupid enough to fight them in that room. I won't make that mistake again. Amelia had even more good news for her old mentor and friend. Those 4 have instigated a program where they're teaching the younger kids what they've learned. Susan wrote me and said it was unbelievable. She's helping out this year and now expects to ace her defense OAWO. He was quiet for a moment before answering. I always expected to die on the job, Amelia. Today gave me my first sign of hope that I could one day retire and spend my time trying to perfect my rum recipe. The only thing stopping me from having a right good rum sampling session tonight is I need to face those 4 tomorrow. They won't catch me out again. Knowing her old mentor, Amelia could confidently predict there would be payback on the menu for those 4 tomorrow. The 4 friends couldn't have cared less what was on the menu for lunch. They were all shattered. This was such an unusual sight, Roger just had to comment. What the hell happened to you lot? Did I look like that after our first session? Padma's head was resting on the table by now, so Hermione answered. Our tutor decided he would try and work us to death. When he gave us a task and we completed it, he just upped the ante and then had us do more even quicker. And that was before Harry pissed him off. Hermione was quick to defend her mate from Padma's charge. Harry just did what we usually do. How was he to know that Moody had only borrowed those dueling dummies? Neville was staring at his betrothed, thinking she had the right idea, and he was seriously considering joining Padma in getting his head down. Moody had never seen a sword used on a dueling dummy before. His repairy didn't even come close to fixing them. He then had us running while shooting at targets. Of course he was firing curses at us as we were doing this. Moody really impressed me with the amount of swear words he knew. Master Sharpshard would be hard-pressed to match that quantity and quality. I'm now beginning to think this free period after our extra defense class on Thursdays was well planned. There's a couch in the Ravenclaw common room with my name on it. I'll name on it Harry, and that sounds a wonderful idea. Bugger that. A wonderful idea would be bringing that couch down here, not having to drag myself all the way to Ravenclaw Tower. Just the thought of facing all those stairs makes this table feel like a comfortable mattress. That's because Neville cast a cushioning charm on it for you. Now, Hermione, just because I have such a considerate and caring betrothed, there's no need to let your jealousy show. Neville, honey, I'll kiss you for that later. It will need to be later. I think Neville's fallen asleep. Come on, Hermione, let's face those stairs and keep our date with that couch. Could someone please make sure we're awake for defense? Padma managed to mumble something along the same lines before she too succumbed to her exhaustion. Their exhaustion was still evident as Remus started his defense class. The professor's enthusiasm, though, soon captured the students' attention, especially the subject matter. Remus had a boggart in the class, stored in an old wardrobe that once held professors' robes in the staff room. He explained to everyone that they would face their greatest fear, and carefully took them through the steps and spell needed to overcome the boggart. They were all lined up to take turns at facing the boggart, but Harry's mind for once was elsewhere. He'd known pretty much what was coming this morning. Moody would have to re-establish his authority and would do so by pushing them as hard as he dared. The session was as brutal as any Harry had ever taken part in, physically and magically draining. What had humbled Harry, though, was the way the other three just kept going, giving everything they had and then some. They must have been hurting more than he was yet. Padma still found the energy to joke with Hermione before she fell asleep at the Ravenclaw table. He had practically to carry his mate up those last 2 flights of stairs, but thought spending time sleeping on the sofa with Hermione in his arms was well worth the effort. This was what Harry couldn't get out of his mind while he pushed his body to its limits in preparation to face his nemesis. Those three were doing the same purely to ensure he wouldn't face his destiny alone. As friends, Harry didn't think he could find better ones anywhere on the planet. He was drawn out of his musings by a loud girly shriek, only to see Ronald Weasley facing a giant spider. For some reason, clothing the enormous arachnid in the most hideous shade of orange seemed to allay his fears. The boggart's attention was now focused on Harry, and he had no idea what to expect. Father suddenly standing there was a complete surprise, though it was the words this representation spoke that froze Harry to the spot. "How could I ever love a human child? You were a business deal, nothing more." Barchoke then morphed into Sirius, but the words were every bit as hurtful. "Why would I want anything to do with you? I'm going to have children of my own." Sirius, morphing into Hermione, finally produced a reaction. Just not from Harry. Before the representation could say a word, the original was there with her sword in her hand. "Get lost, bitch, she's mine." Her sword swipe produced the unusual effect of turning that Hermione into Harry, a Harry wearing an evil smirk on his face. "Surely you don't think I could really love someone as plain as you?" The next thing the class heard was a growled "ridiculous" as Godric's sword banished the doppelganger into the wardrobe, which, due to the power of the spell, also flew across the classroom and smacked into the wall. Hermione felt an arm slip around her waist as she was gently pulled back to rest against her mate. She then heard the words that meant so much to her. "You are mine and I am yours." Hermione whispered them back before Padma, in her own inimitable style, interrupted. "You might want to tag a few more words on there. Something like, 'You are my witch.' Then Hermione might actually remember she was one." This raised a laugh and relieved any tension in the classroom. Hermione played along as she sheathed her blade. "Okay, use sword for dementors and basilisks. Wand for boggarts and annoying best friends." "Got it." Remus too had been stunned into inaction at Harry's greatest fears being broadcast to the class. It was now time to take back control, though. "Class, return to your seats. I might be able to coax that boggart out in time for next year's class, but certainly not today." Seeing that Remus was playing the incident as a bit of fun, Susan decided to help. "Sir, next year will be Crow's Marauders. There's no way that boggart will come out to face that lot." Pansy too got right into the spirit of it. "You'll have our Marauders the year after that. They're frightened of nothing." Morrig had something that was worrying her, though. "That's if Professor Lupin is still here. There's supposed to be a curse on the defense position at Hogwarts. No one has lasted more than a year in the job for decades. There was a curse and it's been dealt with." Harry suddenly found all eyes back on him as he realized he must be tireder than he thought to let that slip. He decided just to explain his remark to the class. Every headmaster of Hogwarts couldn't resist tampering with the castle's wards, supposedly improving them. We were left with a right mishmash that allowed poison to be delivered by owls to students. Hidden away in this jumble was one that wasn't cast by any headmaster. It was basically a bad luck jinx focused on the defense department. Hang around the classroom and office long enough and it was sure to have an effect on the professor. The new ward scheme obviously doesn't have that. "Why, thank you, Centurion Crow. It's really nice to know I may still be here this time next year." or until one of you lot want my job. I suppose I could handle being replaced one day by a marauder. Remus was a very popular professor, so that suggestion was rapidly shouted down before he got his lesson back on track, taking careful note of how Harry was handling the boggart situation. He held the four back at the end of the class for a moment, just to ensure everything was fine. Harry, you know those fears are groundless, right? Yeah, Remus. I know. Still, a bit of a shock though. Not when you think about it. Padma was looking quite thoughtful as she expanded on that. Parvati may be scared by mummies, but the thought of anything happening to Neville terrifies me. Well, I was just about cheering when Harry banished that thing back into its lair. I was dreading facing it. And what frightens my big brave Gryffindor? Knowing he was now caught, Neville let out what had been the cause of a few nightmares. Your father telling me that, because you're an identical twin, I had bonded to both you and your sister. The Patil twins have never been identical to me, and I do like Parvati, but I could never marry her. Yet I knew seeing that in class today would really hurt her. I must have a bit of goblin in me because I only ever want to marry one witch, my perfect Padmo. She leaned in and kissed her mate gently on the lips. I must have some goblin blood too, because this witch doesn't share, not even with Parvati. I wish I wasn't so knackered, or I could drag you into a broom closet and show you just how much I mean that. You must be tired to forget there's a professor standing here. Now get straight to dinner and then an early night. You lot look done in. Hermione though was shaking her head. We've got a revision meeting for our potions lesson tomorrow. You don't turn up for Master Pitsley's class unprepared. With that they headed off to dinner, as Remus thought he better have a quiet word with Sirius. What happened here would soon spread throughout the castle. At least the Barchoke doppelganger spoke in Goblin, and no one who understood that language would ever breathe a word of what was supposedly said by Harry's father. Harry wasn't surprised when he received a letter from his father mentioning the incident in defense class. He knew the extended family now in the castle would have passed that news on. It felt good to have so many people looking out for him, and his father also raised something he'd been struggling with. Father says hello, and wonders if there is anything in particular you wanted for your birthday. I had been wondering myself what you would want to do to celebrate it. She had obviously been thinking about this. Hermione didn't really like being the center of attention, and her choice collects that we're going to have a lot of fuss the following week, with the Merlin Ball. What I would really like is a quiet evening with just the four of us. I really enjoyed our meal in the infirmary, and this time I would be able to use my knife and fork. We would have to explain my decision to Luna, Parvati, Susan and the rest. Harry put his arm around her. First rule of birthdays. The birthday girl gets what she wants. Leave the rest to me. At that, Tonks approached with Bill and asked if she could speak with them before their lessons began. They had just reached the room when Bill had a question. He'd been desperate to ask them. What the hell did you four do to Mad-Eye? He sought me out to shake my hand, and then slapped a bottle of very good rum into it. We just did what you taught us, and we might have beaten him in a fight. This had Bill laughing. He fought you in here, and of course you didn't tell him this room would help you four. This had Tonks staring at the four in disbelief before remembering the reason why she was here. With a stafed Death Eaters still on the loose, there won't be an extra trip to Hogsmeade before the Merlin Ball. Halloween, though, is traditional. Hogsmeade full of Hogwarts students will be a tempting target, and one I'm determined to see protected. I was wondering if the nation would consider allowing goblin warriors to supplement the force of Aruas the ministry will have on duty in the village that weekend. I think that is a brilliant idea, Assistant Ambassador Weasley. I won't be available for lessons that weekend. I intend to be on duty. Harry then turned to Hermione. We could visit my parents the weekend before Halloween. It's probably safer to do that anyway in case anyone stakes out the cemetery on that day. Padma then had a suggestion. Can we wait until nearer the time and decide if we want to go to Hogsmeade? With Mad-Eye going to be hammering us twice a week, the thought of a weekend off is very appealing. Hermione would be very welcome to come to Hogsmeade with us too. The bigger the group we're in, the better. Tonks was delighted her idea was so well received. I'll put it to Madam Bones, and Bill can take the idea to Barchoke. We still have weeks yet to organize this. Should we keep it as a surprise? No. The four had spoken almost as one, but it was left to Harry to explain their reasoning. Making their tutor proud, Keeping it quiet would be the equivalent of using the Hogwarts students as bait, not something we want to be a part of. Even one student injured in an attack would be classed as a failure. We want this publicized so no Death Eaters come within 100 miles of Hogsmeade over the Halloween weekend. With that settled, Tonks stayed just to see how good these four really were. She was astonished. Individually she would still be able to take them in a fight. Harry would certainly be a close-run thing. They didn't fight as individuals though, and that's what would have surprised the hell out of Mardai. Bill had them working like a combat team. It suddenly struck the aura that's exactly what they were. Bill was training the four of them to survive encounters with Death Eaters and Voldemort himself. Tonks felt like crying. She really liked these teens, but they were training for a job that they shouldn't have to do. Going after the bad guys was the task of Tonks and her fellow Auras. She silently swore to be there at their side if the worst ever happened. She had no way of knowing she'd just joined a long list of people who'd sworn the exact same thing. It was going to be a crowded battlefield if they all managed to keep their promises. It didn't matter how crowded their timetable became. Harry intended to keep his promise and look out for Natalie and Pauline. This was proving rather easy to do as both girls were settling in well to Hogwarts. Luna and Colin, with lots of help from Ginny, were seeing to that. They were sitting in a large group after dinner chatting as the two girls were describing their favorite classes. Remus, Henrika, and Sirius would be pleased to know they were such a hit with the younger students. Harry thought this would be a good time to break the plans for Hermione's birthday next week, and found less resistance than he anticipated. Murray summed up the feelings of the other Ravenclaws. It's Sunday and we start the week off with double potions, and we only find out on the Friday what potion Master Pitsley is going to have us brew. He hadn't thought about that before. So Harry promised to ask if they could find out both future potions on a Monday. Luna and Parvati were also rather philosophical about it too. We have the Merlin Ball the following Saturday, and you four are so busy an evening by yourselves will be good for you. Harry then had something to add that really pleased the two first-year girls. Once again the Goblin tailors would be arriving to provide clothing for their entire year group to wear at the Merlin Ball. New dresses and their first ball saw both girls excited. The promise of a dance with Harry had Natalie and Pauline counting the days. After counting the days it was finally here. Hermione was 14. The birthday girl was greeted first by Padma and Luna, the latter presenting her with a gift that was a miniature moonlight formed out of black glass. Hermione loved it. Harry was waiting for them at the bottom of the stairs, supplying her birthday kiss before offering his arm as they headed off to meet the rest of their friends at breakfast. They had given their exercises a miss in honor of her birthday, and to give their bodies a rest from their new training regime. She received lots of gifts and cards. There was even a giant one signed by every member of Crow's Marauders that she found really touching. Hermione knew her main presents would come at dinner tonight, but she was still overwhelmed at the thoughtfulness of people. Draco actually gifted her a rare book from the Malfoy library. There was even a letter and small gift from Sapphire, all the way from Cairo. It was the gift of another book though that really made Hermione's day. The cover was black dragon skin with the lettering done in gold. Such a simple title, but it had the birthday girl so excited. The Nation by Lady Henrika Black was worth its weight in gold to someone who would one day marry a goblin. Oh, thank you, Henrika. I love it already. It's not being released to the public until Halloween. I know you'll have it read by then and point out any mistakes I've made before it goes to print. There are only 4 copies of that edition. Sirius. My mum and the director have the other 3. Hermione was already working out where she could find an hour today to just curl up and begin reading a book she'd looked forward to getting her hands on for almost 2 years. With no training today, they held their potions study group in the Great Hall after lunch. The Weasley twins and Neville were now able to attend too. Old Sluggy was hovering around the edges of the group, desperate for any sort of invitation where he could show off his knowledge. No such invitation was forthcoming. He was even ready to butt in a few times, but the question asked would be quickly answered within the group. When it became embarrassingly clear his expertise was neither needed nor wanted, he slinked away back to the dungeons. The Goblin tailors had been inside the castle yesterday to provide the new first years with clothes for the Merlin Ball. They also supplied Hermione and Padma with new dresses, one for tonight and another for the ball. The girls took Harry's breath away as they walked down the stairs to greet him. They had the same effect on all the Ravenclaw wizards currently in the common room too. That Hermione was in purple while Padma wore a dusky pink was as much as Harry could tell you about the dresses. Apart from the fact that they emphasized both girls' beauty in a way that did something to his insides. That both girls also had their swords on their hips wasn't worth commenting on. They always had their swords there. The Lady Ravenclaw and Sir Nicholas were providing the chaperone service tonight. Augusta knew both girls would be perfectly safe, but this saved her from any charges of favoritism towards the couples. Hogwarts had provided an intimate setting of a table for four beside a small dance floor. There was a gramophone sitting at the side, and the entire scene was lit by candlelight. They all took their seats and Harry offered his first gift before the meal was served. "This is your real gift from Sirius and Henrika. The book was just an extra father rushed through so it would be ready for your birthday." Hermione unwrapped the box, only to find it contained a rather plain hand mirror. She had no idea what to say when Harry asked her a question. "Who would you most like to speak to right now?" That was easy. "My mum and dad." At that the mirror appeared to tremble before an image of her mother appeared, with her father quickly looking over her shoulder. "Oh, Hermione. Happy birthday." She couldn't take her eyes off the images. "Is this a recording?" It was actually her father who answered. "No, love. It's real, and you look beautiful." She now had tears of joy in her eyes. "Thanks, Dad. It's great to see you guys again. We miss you too. We don't have Sirius popping in and telling us all the latest news from Hogwarts anymore, so he arranged this. Isn't it wonderful we can chat whenever we want?" "It's brilliant, Mum. And I'll thank him from all of us later." Dan was struggling to believe the beautiful young woman in the mirror was actually their little girl. She seemed all glowed up already. "So what have you guys been doing today?" "Everyone knows what they're supposed to do, so let's go." The hired muscle Bloodfang had brought with him tonight knew how to do their job. More importantly, they knew how to keep their mouths shut. They also knew he would arrange to have them permanently shut if they didn't. He hadn't wanted to be anywhere near this house tonight, but Bloodfang couldn't really send a boy to do a goblin's work. Dragontooth was actually quivering with excitement beside him as the first pair of muscle went through the fancy glass doors as if they weren't there. When hit with a battle axe they soon weren't. These muggles had such strange ideas. What was the point of having doors that could be so easily broken into? You might as well start making glass hammers. The other pair of muscle were also in the house before he and his son entered. The human bitch was screaming already and they hadn't even started yet. Something his son couldn't help but point out. "Save some of that screaming, bitch. You're going to need it when we make this the most memorable birthday your daughter's ever had." All six of the goblins were soon flying across the room before hitting the walls as a weirdly dressed house elf stood there snapping its fingers. "Where did these muggles get a house elf? You will not hurt Dobby's family." Being a house elf, Dobby's magic wouldn't let him attack these goblins outright. It didn't stop him assisting his mistress and master though. Dobby thought the best way to assist them was to hand down his shotgun. Loaded of course. Dan was incensed that these goblins would not only break into his home but threaten his wife. When Dobby handed him his shotgun, there was no hesitation. The first goblin had bounced off the wall and was now charging with the massive axe that had just made short work of their French doors held ready to strike. A shot to the chest from a distance of less than 8 feet blew him back into the wall where he left a bloody smear. The shotgun traversed almost automatically to the goblin who was nearest Emma. That goblin too was blasted back, hitting his compatriot on the way. The noise of the shotgun being fired inside the house was deafening, but Dan clearly heard Emma's shouted order as he was in the process of handing his gun to Dobby for reloading. "Dobby, get us out of here." Given a direct order, Dobby had no choice but to obey. He grabbed his mistress and pulled her over to where the master was standing with a now empty gun. Dragoontooth could see their entire plan disintegrating before his very eyes. There would be no recovering from the shame of being outwitted and defeated by a couple of muggles with a house elf. He had the family sacrificial dagger in his hand, that Dragoontooth was supposed to use for the first time tonight when killing these muggles. Seeing them escaping saw him lose all reason and throw the blade. He let out a victory yell when the three disappeared and his blade went with them. He must have hit someone. His victory yell was short-lived though, as he heard his hated nickname being shouted from somewhere. He walked over to the table where a mirror lay. Picking it up, he could clearly see an absolutely enraged crow screaming at him. "You fucking cowardly bastard, I warned you what would happen the next time you messed with my family. I will cut your ears off and wear them on my belt. You will live only long enough to see this happen, and your father will die shortly after he has witnessed his son's total disgrace and death. I'm coming for you, Dragon Breath, and this time there will be no one to save you." The mirror slid from the goblin's hand and smashed on the table, ending Crow's tirade. But not the threat. His father was trying to pull him out this muggle house, but Dragontooth knew they were both already dead. Inside Hogwarts' room of requirements, Emma's scream of terror instantly turned what had been a happy occasion into a nightmare. Whatever she was now doing with the mirror made it useless for viewing events in Crawley, but both Harry and Hermione instantly recognized Dragonbreath's voice, and all four understood exactly what he meant by that threat. Dobby's intervention left Hermione wanting to kiss the little guy, while the first blast of the shotgun had all four of them ready to punch the air in celebration. Each knew that weapon in Dan's hands just swung the balance of the fight in the Granger's favor. They clearly heard Emma order Dobby to get them out of there, and only Dragonbreath's yell of triumph stopped the four doing some triumphant screaming of their own. Harry had snatched the mirror out of Hermione's hand and was now repeatedly screaming Dragonbreath into it, being finally rewarded when the goblin picked up the mirror. "You fucking cowardly bastard. I warned you what would happen the next time you messed with my family. I will cut your ears off and wear them on my belt. You will live only long enough to see this happen, and your father will die shortly after he has witnessed his son's total disgrace and death. I'm coming for you, Dragonbreath, and this time there will be no one to save you." The mirror suddenly went blank, and Harry's focus shifted once more to the room they were in, a room that held his mate, who was currently being comforted by their best friends. Before he could say anything, a high-pitched screech began being emitted from his concealed holster. Harry's knife was out as he instantly signaled his acknowledgement. "That's the emergency recall signal from my father. It means get yourself to Gringotts as quickly as possible. I hope Dobby took them to father. Either way, he knows something is wrong. Neville, could you tell?" "No, not happening. Harry, we're coming too. Dan and Emma mean the world to all of us. We will not sit here and wait on news, and you might need us. I didn't want you getting into trouble." Padma shot that excuse down too. "Our orders of Merlin mean that we're considered adults now. We won't get into trouble for this. The Lady Ravenclaw and Sir Nicholas can take messages for us." At that, another door appeared in the room, and Helena quickly explained its function. "There is a passage out of Hogwarts connected to this room. You will feel when you pass from the wards, and then your portkey will be able to activate." A determined Hermione was now at Harry's side. "We're wasting time." At that, the four ran for the door. Neither girl was dressed for battle, but both were more than ready to fight one. All felt the tingle that indicated they had passed from the powerful Hogwarts wards, and they touched Harry's portkey to be whisked away to Gringotts. On hearing that their children had been witnesses to the Crawley attack, this immediately had a cursing Barchoke racing to the point Harry's portkey would deliver them into Gringotts. They would be demanding answers, and certainly in no mood to be denied those answers. Tonight would be a massive test of his diplomatic skills to stop this situation escalating. He reached the location just as the portkey set them down. Hermione came racing into his arms as he held his daughter close. "Dobby brought Dan and Emma to me. Your mother is wounded, but I don't have any more information at the moment. The healers are looking at her while Dan stands guard over Emma with his shotgun poised for action. Dobby's right by his side and ready to hand Dan its loaded partner. We need to get up there right away. One wrong move or word and innocent blood is going to be spilt." The tension in the infirmary was palpable. Dan barely relaxed his stance as they entered the large room, and he wouldn't relax until that bloody great goblin knife was removed from his wife. Harry also couldn't miss the ornate hilt sticking out of Emma's belly, and it was Centurion Crow who demanded to know the reason why it was still there. The command in Harry's voice produced an instant answer from the healer. "It's a family ritual knife, Centurion Crow, and has a deeply serrated edge. We would usually transfigure the blade to something safer for removal, but none of us here has the power to overcome the enchantments on the knife. Trying to remove it by other means could kill the patient." Harry drew his sword and felt the shotgun move to cover him. After the night he'd just had, Harry didn't blame Dan one bit for that reaction. The only people in the room Dan truly trusted at the moment were his daughter, who was now at her unconscious mother's bedside, and the faithful elf who'd saved his family tonight. Harry needed to get through the trust issue in order to help Emma. Dan, I want this knife out of Emma, as much as you do. You know my sword is more powerful than my knife. This was the attacker's ultimate objective, Dan, to turn us all against each other. I swear to you they will pay this with their lives. But Emma's life is far more important to all of us at the moment. Let's get her healed and then we'll see about making every one of those bastards who broke into your house tonight pay for this. The shotguns slowly lowered and they could all see just how close to the edge Dan Granger actually was. The gentle dentist who had never used his shooting skills to even hunt rabbits had blown two attackers apart yet still couldn't prevent his wife's injury. Just get my Emma healed, son. That's all I care about. We'll get her healed, Dan, and then make sure this never happens again. Hermione was sitting beside her mother, and now holding Emma's hand. Padma and Neville was standing beside her to offer support. Harry held his sword over the hilt of the knife, and began pouring his magic into the spell. Beads of sweat were soon peppering his forehead. But there was no quitting in this endeavor. If it took every scrap of magic he had to break the enchantments on the knife, then that's what he was going to pour into his sword. The enchantments finally surrendered with an audible crack, leaving the blade section transfigured to be a replica of his own knife. The stiletto blade would now be straightforward for the healers to remove. Harry thought he might actually need the healer's services too, as he was left feeling light-headed and staggering until his father led him to a chair. The knife being removed relaxed a lot of the tension in the room. Dan, though, still desperately sought some assurances. Will she be okay now? Won't that blade have done a lot of internal damage? Seeing that his son was just temporarily exhausted, allowed Barchoke to deal with that question, and the healers to concentrated their efforts on Emma, his answer was for everyone's benefit. A knife like that is a slashing weapon, designed to cause major damage as it rips open someone's torso. Using it as a stabbing or throwing weapon will certainly reduce its effectiveness, unless you yank the weapon out the wound you just created. Emma has still been stabbed though, and we'll need to wait and see what the actual damage is before we can predict her recovery with any confidence. Hermione managed a wan smile of thanks to her mate for his efforts. All her attention though was focused on the deathly pale figure lying on the bed, and what the healers were doing to her mother. They had cut her clothes to leave her midriff bare with a blue sheet protecting her modesty. The knife had entered just beneath and to the left of her belly button, but the healers had quickly staunched the flow of blood now that the blade had been removed. The potion that the healer then poured into the cleaned wound began to fizz, and Hermione was just about to ask what was happening when the first fiber from the blue jumper her mother had been wearing came to the surface. The process was repeated until there was nothing left to expel. Then the healers began to close the wound. Harry had said before that goblin healers were the best at dealing with these kind of wounds, and their expertise as they teased the gash closed was there for all to see. Emma would be left with a scar that was nothing more than a very thin line. It would be a couple of hours before the healers could predict Emma's recovery with any degree of certainty. So they settled down to wait. Dobby left his master's side for a moment to provide refreshments for everyone. Even as they settled to wait, Dan still had the broken shotgun across his lap, ready to snap closed and fire in an instant. Hermione then asked the first of many questions she had about tonight's attack. "Dad, why didn't you and Mum just use the emergency port keys Harry provided to escape?" It was a rather sheepish Dan who answered his daughter honestly. "Probably because they're both sitting on the hall table. We kept them beside the car keys so we wouldn't leave the house without them. I thought they were for protection outside the wards. I couldn't imagine needing them in our own lounge. They should never have been able to get through your wards. They clearly meant you harm, so that should have barred their entrance, goblin or not. We need that question answered very quickly, as those same wards now protect Hogwarts, the Ministry and many homes, including Amelia's and the Minister of Magic's." While he could appreciate Barchoke's point, at the moment Dan wasn't concerned with the wider implications of this. He just wanted a healer to come and tell him his wife would be okay. Their lives had changed dramatically over the last few years, and this had left Dan with the impression he could just about cope with anything now. Fate must have been laughing her ass off at that. Watching the woman he loved lying there fighting for her life dramatically emphasized how unprepared he was to deal with this. In all honesty, Dan thought if he lived to be 100 he still could never prepare himself to deal with the possibility of losing Emma. He had so many conflicting emotions rushing through him that when the door crashed open, Dan automatically began cocking and moving the shotgun. That was until a golden gauntlet clamped down on it. Dan, pointing your gun at the director would be a death sentence. I have no intention of explaining your absence to Mum later. Harry's words got through to the man. Though Ragnarok was so angry he had missed the entire byplay. He headed straight for Barchoke. Your squad of warriors were on them before they cleared the wards. We have all of them in cells, except for the two Miss Granger's father blasted to bits. That's some weapon, but also a discussion for another time. How they breached the wards is far more important. Bloodfang had a low-key talisman. Barchoke exploded at the implications of Ragnarok's words. That profitless, genderless, short-eared, motherless, arse-kissing, ignorant lump of future dragon shit. He was trying to start a war. This is treason. Harry, who was every bit as shocked as his father, explained to the others just what was going on. A low-key talisman is the most restricted item in the nation. Even possessing the knowledge of how one is made will see you and your family wiped out. It's a very powerful artifact that will literally bend wards around it, and whoever is touching it, not only is it banned by the nation, it's banned by ministerial treaty too, specifically because it allows goblins to do what Bloodfang did tonight, to any warded home. Think of it like a skeleton key. Only it works on wards rather than locks. The mystery of how such a mediocre family amassed wealth and power is explained. They stole it. Harry then left Hermione's side and gave a centurion salute to Ragnarok before surprising everyone present. Director, I know they are now sentenced to death, but I respectfully submit. I have a prior claim. I swore to kill Dragontooth and his father. I don't know what magical consequences I would face if I stood back and let them be executed. And why should I let these traitors enter the pit? They deserve no such honor. Again, with respect, Director, I had no intention of paying them any. They will be slaughtered like the traitors they are, and in so doing my hope is that my family will never again be targeted by a member of our nation. Barchoke desperately wanted to talk his son out of this course of action, but could see from the determined set of his jaw, it would be an exercise in futility. Only one person had any hope of changing his mind, but Hermione was still holding Emma's hand, as if doing so could keep her mother anchored to this plane of existence, and prevent Emma from leaving them. She was paying scant regard to whatever else went on around her. Ragnarok, meanwhile, was considering the matter from a political point of view, preventing a war over this matter being his top priority. A citizen of the nation possessing a device that allowed them to pass through wards was more than enough provocation to start a war between wizard and goblins. It had before. That the same device could also pass through goblin wards was what led to there being such severe penalties for having any involvement with one. A low-key talisman was basically a master key for access to the bank too. That there hadn't been an incident involving one for at least half a millennium had led to complacency on their part. Here though was a golden opportunity to show the nation just what Centurion Crow was capable of, and also let the Ministry of Magic see just how serious they were taking this situation. He needed one more piece of information before making his decision and sent for the healer in charge. Ragnarok wanted a report on the prognosis of the woman. The next few hours are critical, Director. If she makes it through the night, I would be confident in predicting a full recovery. The patient is strong and healthy, which will certainly help her case. I can't be more specific than that. I'll have a better idea, say around midnight. I want to hear that report. I have a feeling this will be a long night. Ragnarok then turned to Barchoke and his son. I am leaning toward granting this request. I do not want to lose a centurion from the nation, because he has legitimate concerns his family will not be safe. I also don't want this to become a revenge situation though. If your mate's mother doesn't make it through the night, then the dragons will feast on those murderers for breakfast. Either way, they will die tomorrow morning. You have some visitors, and I will return later to hear how things are progressing. As Ragnarok left, Sirius, Henrika, and Amelia were escorted into the room. Sirius headed directly for Harry while his wife held Hermione in her arms. Amelia wanted information and reckoned her best bet for that was Barchoke. She had heard stories about these amulets that could pass through any wards but assumed they were nothing more than myths. She could instantly see how serious a situation this was from the goblin's demeanor. Amelia, the amulet will have already been destroyed, and those who used it will not see another day of banking. Harry has challenged them to the pit and intends to make a statement that his family is off limits. Harry fighting in the pit? Is this wise? Killing someone is a hard thing to live with. Just look at Dan. I would have recommended a calming draft for him. But I know he wouldn't take it, at least until we know about Emma. I can't fault Harry's logic. He fought and killed their champion, yet they still attacked his family. He intends this time to be more of a deterrent. Being responsible for ending 5 lives before you turn 14 is a lot to bear, though. It's certainly a burden. I would rather spare him by providing the dragons with breakfast. Either way, would you witness the event for the ministry? If Harry is fighting, I'll be there. I would be perfectly happy, though, to accept your word. If they get fed to dragons instead, that's not something I really want to see. Like Barchoke, Sirius could see his godson was determined to go through with this. Unlike Barchoke, he was going to talk to Harry and try to dissuade him from this course of action. Being eaten alive by a dragon is a fitting punishment. Harry, it's a punishment they certainly deserve. I agree, Sirius. But it's been done before, so I'm not sure how much of a deterrent it will be. The dragon is only having breakfast. I intend to make this a lot more painful for them. My only other alternative is to leave Gringotts forever. Not an option I want to consider. What would you do to protect Henrika? To allow your unborn children to grow up in safety? That's what's at stake here. Sirius, I need to have this talked about for generations, not just for weeks or months. Henrika considered. Hermione, an incredibly brave, focused and mature young witch. All that had vanished at the moment with her mother lying unconscious on the bed. Hermione had reverted to a little girl who needed her mum, and Henrika couldn't blame her one bit for that. The situation was even worse, though, as Hermione spoke. It's my fault she's lying there. I embarrassed the goblin who did this. And that gave him the right to break into your home and stick a ruddy great knife into Emma? You know better than that, Hermione. You've shown it not only in my class, but the way you live your life. These people hate for whatever reason, and wanted power. That's why they attacked. Without you, would your family have a house elf? Without you, would they have access to this medical facility? If you're blaming yourself for the attack, then you need to also take the credit for their escape and recovery. But I did nothing. Just like you played no part in them being attacked. We both know enough about goblins to recognize this is a political attack against Harry, Barchoke and the director. All 3 of them certainly do. She looked toward her mate, currently deep in discussion with his godfather. Harry's reaction will be brutal. I sometimes think he loves my mum more than he loves me. He'll react as only a goblin can. He wants to face all of them in the pit. There was a part of Hermione that was crying at what her mate would now have to face. Another part thought Harry would give Dragonbreath and his father exactly what they deserved. Anyone who's ever spent time in any medical facility waiting on news knows just how excruciatingly slowly time passes. Conversations were started, but no one had really anything to say. Hermione thanked Sirius for his wonderful present, but refused to open any more until her mum was here with them. When the senior healer did return, it was to Harry that he imparted the news. Your mate's mother has survived through the critical period, and I would now expect continual improvements throughout the night. It will be morning before I can guarantee a full recovery, but that is the result I am now expecting. The transfiguring of the ritual knife was key to this positive result. Thank you for that. Centurion. Hermione now released floods of tears. But these were of the relief variety. Harry held her close until she was over the worst of it before passing her over to Dan. He needed to harden his heart now and meet with the director. There were decisions to be made. Amelia found herself sitting in a group that contained Sirius, Henrika, Neville, Padma, Tonks and Alistair Moody, the goblins, easily recognizing it would be advantageous to have Harry's tutor witness this. Tonks had arrived at Gringotts claiming she was still on protection duty, and wasn't bloody leaving Harry's side. The head of the DML also thought the pit was well named. She couldn't imagine it being called anything else. Amelia found the terror one must feel on entering that arena to be beyond the scope of her imagination. Knowing that the only way you were going to survive the experience was to kill everyone else in there with you was simply mind-blowing. Harry entered the chamber with Hermione on his arm. Barchoke and the biggest goblin she'd ever seen followed on behind. Hearing from Padma that this was Master Sharpshot settled her nerves just a smidgen. If Harry could defeat such a ferocious goblin, then these others shouldn't pose too much of a problem. Her relief soon proved to be temporary, though. The galleries that surrounded the pit were now jam-packed, and they knew the proceedings were about to start when Ragnarok entered. In typical goblin fashion, he didn't keep anyone waiting. "We are here this morning more to explain why these 4 traitors are not dragon food rather than to assess their undeniable guilt. To assist with that endeavor, we will watch a short memory first. This memory came from the Muggle father of Miss Granger, friend of our nation and mate of Centurion Crow, a witch who celebrated her 14th birthday yesterday. The memory showed an image of a smiling and happy Hermione inside some magical mirror just before their home came under attack. All of the attackers were recognized by the goblins watching, and Dragontooth made the intruders' intentions crystal clear. That's when the house elf appeared. There was some derisive laughter at the attackers being thwarted by an elf, but that all stopped the instant the boom of the shotgun was introduced, or rather they all saw the effect this weapon had on someone who would have been considered a dangerous goblin to cross. As if to prove this wasn't a fluke, the Muggle quickly dispatched a second warrior as the little elf was poised ready to hand over another identical weapon. Only the female ordering the elf to get them out of there prevented the Muggles slaughtering the entire group. And then Dragontooth threw that terrible knife. The elf brought them straight to Barchoke, and the memory faded as the ambassador was ordering a squad of goblins to Crawley while shouting for healers to be brought at once for the seriously injured female. All 6 broke into that Muggle home with the sole intention of slaughtering Miss Granger's parents on her birthday. That they used a Loki talisman during this cowardly and despicable act immediately signaled their deaths under our laws. This led to a lot of rumbling from the crowd, but Ragnarok closed this down fast. "I know what you are all thinking. It was my first reaction too. Why should these traitorous cowards receive the honor of fighting in the pit? It is hard to refute Centurion Crow's challenge that he has a prior claim in this case. We all heard him swear to both Bloodfang and Dragontooth what would happen if they ever went near his mate again. Trying to murder his mate's parents on her birthday would certainly invoke that oath, so I have decided to allow this. My main reason, though, was that Centurion Crow assured me he intended to pay them no honor, and would leave all 4 of them wishing they had faced our dragons instead. That is something I think we all would want to see. The director knew his people. Something that would leave a goblin begging to be a dragon's breakfast was also certainly something they would want to witness. Carried out on someone else, of course. With some last-minute words of advice from Master Sharpshot ringing in his ears, Harry entered the pit. He was in full attack mode, shield on his forearm while clutching his knife with Godric's sword held ready in his other hand. His white tunic and the bright plume on his helmet was such a contrast to his surroundings that Harry appeared like a ray of sunshine in the dusty gloom of the pit. And that was before he activated his golden armor. "Do you have a specific order you would like to face them, Centurion?" Harry's reply had his family and friends present wringing their now sweating hands with worry. "I would like to face them all at once, Director." This started some rumblings, and Harry knew a lot of money would be changing hands in the galleries today. Spotting White Fang in the audience, he nodded in his former mentor's direction, trusting the old goblin would be smart enough to get him quick while the offered odds were at their highest. "With respect, Director, had my mate's mother not ordered their elf to get them out of the house, my mate's father would have dispatched all of them. Had he been allowed, he and his elf would like to have taken my place in the pit this morning and finished the job they started." The derogatory chuckles were back even stronger now. Meeting your end at the hands of a Muggle and a house elf held nothing but shame to any warrior. How could I not face the remaining 4 at once, when a Muggle and a house elf took on all 6? Allow them whatever weapons they want, and then I will face them. As final preparations were being made to get all 4 armed and into the pit, Harry was using the time to mentally prepare himself for what he was about to do. Every time his thoughts turned to Emma lying injured in the medical facility allowed Harry's heart to harden slightly. He just hoped it would be enough. If he balked at what he planned to do today, then he might as well pack his bags and go live on his island. As plan B's go, this was a pretty good one, but it was not how he wanted to live for the rest of his life. The quartet strode into the pit as if they had a reprieve, compared to facing a dragon with your bare hands. This was way more preferable. They had no idea their golden foe was every bit as deadly. As Ragnarok read out the charges against them, all four publicly accepted this alternative to being a fire-breathing monster's breakfast. As the combatants faced each other across the floor of the pit, Ragnarok got proceedings underway. To the death, fight. The last syllable had barely left the director's lips when a powerful beam of light shot out Harry's sword. The largest goblin facing him was known as Bone Crusher. No one was sure if that was the name his parents had given him, and Bone Crusher was not the type of goblin you would ask that question of. Master Sharpshard had warned Harry that Bone Crusher was by far and away the most dangerous opponent he faced today. That was why that particular goblin would be the first to die. It was common knowledge that Crow was a wizard who could cast spells from a specially crafted knife, but he could also use his sword to perform magic was not. Bone Crusher had been studying his opponent from about 20 feet away, with no intention of getting much closer until he had some measure of this pup's capabilities. The spell from the sword was a complete surprise. The spell hit Bone Crusher at the shoulder and traveled as Crow flicked his sword. The cutting curse lopped off his arm, along with a chunk of shoulder, an instant before finding its real target. As the large body flopped down onto the sand, the head bloodily parted at the neck and rolled a few times before coming to rest. Dragon Tooth had just spent the worst night of his life inside a dungeon cell. He could hear his father ranting about how they would have to live with the shame of being bested by a muggle and a house elf. Dragon Tooth just wanted to live. On hearing they would now face Crow in the pit, his father had been ecstatic. Here was the way out he'd spent the night searching for. Dragon Tooth, though, again just wanted to survive, and was counting heavily on Bone Crusher to help turn that hope into reality. As that big head rolled across the sand and stopped at his boot, Dragon Tooth's hope drained away quicker than that same sand could soak up his now dead supposed savior's blood. Dragon Tooth knew he was going to die and Crow would make his death a horrible one. That was what he'd promised, and the Centurion seemed more than capable of keeping that promise. The once proud Dragon Tooth sank to his knees and sobbed. He was out of the fight and simply awaited his fate. Along with everyone watching this contest, Bloodfang understood the rules had changed. How could you possibly fight an opponent who can cut you to ribbons before you even get close enough to use your own weapon? Unlike his son, though, Bloodfang was made of sterner stuff and tried to unsettle his opponent. So this is Ragnarok's great champion. Where is the honor in firing a spell at your opponent? The goblin's words died in his throat as Crow just annihilated his remaining hired muscle in a terrifying fashion. In a move he'd practiced on countless occasions, Harry attacked this second opponent as if the goblin was a dueling dummy. Curses were coming from his knife and sword as he covered the distance between them incredibly quickly, allowing his target no time to do anything more than react as best he could to the relentless onslaught. The now bleeding goblin did manage a swipe with his sword as Harry came into range. It was weak and uncoordinated, though, allowing Harry to deflect the attempted blow on his shield, while his knife then slashed across the goblin's chest. This left his opponent open for the killing blow with his sword. Harry then braced himself and used the blasting curse to get his sword clear of the torso he'd just implanted it in, and throw his now dead opponent across the pit. Rather than verbally spar with Bloodfang, Harry next did the one thing certain to send the goblin crazy. He was already moving while the stunned audience tried to contemplate what the Centurion had just done to a capable opponent. Dragon Tooth offered no resistance as Harry's blade sang through the air toward him. Bloodfang watched helplessly as Crow's sword expertly sliced open his son's belly, spilling Dragon Tooth's intestines onto the sand. "You human bastard, you just killed my son." Charging the golden figure with a battle axe that was desperate to taste revenge, Bloodfang met an opponent who was stronger, far more skilled and every bit as motivated as he was. Harry met the charge, deflected the axe away with his shield before driving his sword into Bloodfang's shoulder. His knife then slashed across the pinned goblin, gutting him like a fish. As the last opponent sank to the sand, Harry girded his loins for his final act of brutality. He couldn't fail now, or this would all be for naught. The life was slowly leaving Dragontooth's eyes as Harry's knife expertly flashed twice to remove his ears. Standing holding his prize, he addressed the now stunned audience. The entire fight had only lasted a few minutes. Most of you will have seen me fight in the pit before. On that occasion I fought an honorable though misguided warrior. I fought that day with the same honor shown me. I fought with the honor of a proud centurion. These four have no honor, and received none from me. Like any goblin, I will protect my family, and the same fate awaits any that would dare attack them. Be that wizard or goblin. Standing there splattered in fresh blood, and with four bodies lying around him, Centurion Crow certainly made his point. He wasn't finished yet though. He had one final humiliation for the dying Bloodfang. Director, by law I am allowed to claim that family's fortune, and now do so. I do not want one coin for myself, but wish to see everything converted into gold coin and placed in the square. Then every child is allowed to take away as much as they can carry on their own, with as many repeat visits as necessary allowed until it is all gone. Not content with killing and dishonoring his son, Bloodfang now faced death, knowing that the fortune his family had spent generations carefully stealing would be snatched away by the hands of children. His last breath was spent hoping his ancestors weren't waiting on him when he died. Since Ragnarok and Harry had already discussed this action earlier, the director agreed and announced a date 2 weeks from now to allow time for treasures and gems to be converted into gold coin. He also expected his subjects to use this time to contact relatives living abroad and have them return to London for a visit. As much free gold as their children could carry was one almighty incentive for organizing a family trip to Britain. This morning really couldn't have gone much better for Ragnarok. A politically powerful enemy had bled their lifeblood into the sand. His sponsored centurion had performed beyond all expectations, and Gringotts would soon be flooded by goblin visitors from around the world. That the traitors were dead and the offending artifact destroyed should also appease the ministry. A charitable donation to St. Mungo's would help as well. Now all he had to do was convince some of this influx of goblin visitors to stay in a changing Britain. Harry threw his grisly trophies away. Master Sharpsword's axe may hang on his wall, but he could never perceive of any circumstances where he would collect trophies like that. He walked toward Hermione, his father and Master Sharpsword, as all four then left the chamber with their heads held high. They had barely traveled halfway down the first corridor. When Harry spoke, the command in his voice was obvious. Hermione, you go and see if Mum's awake yet. I'm going to need a long shower and a change of clothes before I can go anywhere near the medical facility. He marched away at the next junction, leaving Hermione perplexed. Then she made her mind up. Father, I need to go to him. Tell my dad that Harry's fine and will be there shortly. Both goblins watched her leave, but it was Sharpsword who spoke first. She is such a brave lass, perfect for your son. They will provide you with grandchildren that will change our world, my old friend. I have a feeling that by the time those grandchildren appear, their parents may have changed the world so much already that our parents wouldn't recognize it. Amelia understood what she'd just watched. She was having a hard time recognizing the young man who was such a good friend to her niece as being the same person who carried out those terrible acts. Seeing that particular attack carried out on a dueling dummy was scary enough. Witnessing it used on a living being was terrifying. The other four had shot off to Emma's bedside in the hope of seeing Harry there, leaving a stunned Amelia sitting here with her two Auroras. She gratefully accepted Alastair's flask and took a long pull. Amelia, today I saw proof of what I had only suspected before. Not only will Harry have the ability to one day take down Voldemort, he's clearly got the stones to finish the job. You don't think that was rather excessive? No, I don't. You heard the Lady Black's explanation. They intended to gut that girl's parents and leave them lying there, waiting to be found as a macabre birthday present. This was a set of planned executions with political overtones. What you see down there is a very personal and yet still political answer. I've never seen a more blatant demonstration of a warning to go anywhere near that girl. Is an invitation to a horrible death. Tonks agreed with Mad-Eye and tried to set her boss's mind at rest. I've probably had more contact with Harry than both of you, and I agree with what Mad-Eye just said. A wizard behaving like that would be cause to consider they were going dark. To a goblin, it's simply about getting the job done. Harry wanted the Grangers to be safe, and this will certainly help with that. I can't imagine witnessing that demonstration and still having the will to attack them. I watched those four train and had deluded myself into thinking I could still best Harry that attack on the second goblin would be just as devastating to a witch or wizard to deal with. Amelia was reminded of what Barchoke had said to her earlier, that killing someone was a hard burden to bear. She would have to be very careful not to treat Harry any differently now. Harry felt different. He felt as if the blood he had spilled today then left its indelible mark on him, like a permanent scar across his forehead that declared to the world he was a killer. He was sitting on the shower floor, curled into a ball while hugging his knees to his chest as the warm water rained down on him. The gentle hands were moving Harry before he realized he was no longer alone. His mate was sitting right next to him and slowly pulling his body into a hug. "Hermione, how can you stand to touch me after what I just did? Harry, you entered that pit with love in your heart, not hate. Only your love of me and our family could see you do that. You killed those goblins to protect us, just like Dad did last night with his shotgun. Do you think any less of him for that? I thought he was amazing, Hermione. He stood there and fought like a warrior to protect Mum. And you fought like a centurion to keep us all safe. I'm so proud of the men in my life." She leaned in and gave Harry a very practical demonstration of the fact she felt no revulsion toward him by instigating a very tender kiss. Harry was enjoying the kiss immensely. His favorite pastime seemed to be enhanced by the fact they were in the shower. "Hermione, we're in the shower." "I know, Harry." "Hermione, we're in the shower with no clothes on." "Well, I never read it in Henrika's book, but I suppose she'll need to add that goblins take showers with their clothes on." "Goblins don't take showers with their clothes on." "Oh, I am so glad to hear that. It would be just so weird, don't you think? Hermione, the two of us are in here naked." It had taken all Hermione's courage to go through with this. The very thought that Harry might reject her had never crossed her mind. "I just thought that you might seriously need cheering up. If it bothers you, I could leave." Just mentioning leaving, though, saw her mate's arms tighten around her as he instigated a loving kiss of his own. "After the horror of this morning, I felt dead inside. Now, seeing my mate in her full beautiful glory has helped push those terrible visions aside. I now have something far more wonderful to dream about when I close my eyes. Thank you so much, Hermione. You are mine, and I am yours, Harry. Nothing is going to change that. I was considering moving our relationship forward slightly after my birthday, but felt you needed something special today. I also knew I could trust you. Hermione, I would never—" "I know, love. Stand up and hold me while I wash your hair. We won't be doing this again for a long while, so let's enjoy it while we can. It could become something we save for very special occasions, though." Harry held his mate with all the tenderness he possessed, as she gently massaged shampoo into his long black locks. Hermione's naked ministrations were washing away the horror and again emphasizing to Harry that he could face anything with his mate by his side. Her courage and trust in him just turned a morning Harry never wanted to think of again into something he would look back on with great fondness for the rest of his life. They got dried and dressed together, neither feeling any shame at their actions. Harry had certainly felt Hermione's wonderful chest against his as she held him close, and his hand had most definitely strayed over her gorgeous bum, but apart from devouring each other with their eyes, that was as far as they went. Both had the maturity to know they weren't ready for any more yet. They still had almost 3 years before they would marry. It was a happy and very clean couple, though, who made their way toward Mum's room. The couple entered the room, and seeing her mother now awake, Hermione shot toward her bed. Only her mother's condition slowed Hermione down and stopped her crashing into the recovering Emma. The body that passed Hermione heading in the opposite direction was under no such restrictions. She slammed into Harry hard enough to almost have them over. He stood there once more with a beautiful witch clinging to him, and Harry thought he was one lucky goblin. "Oh, Harry, I didn't want you thinking we thought any different of you now. I still love you. Just not as much as I love my Neville, mind." "I know, Padma, and I'm really happy with all of that." Harry was hugging her back, accepting the offered comfort from his friend. He was then passed from Padma to Henrika, for more of the same. Tonks looked ready to hit him one first. I don't know whether to smack you for leaving Hogwarts without me or that I'll face them all at once. Director decision. Never do either again. She did hug him though before pushing him in Amelia's direction. I know you only did what you had to, Harry. You impressed the hell out of Mad Eye and scared years off my life. Neville and Sirius congratulated him, and Barchoke thought this certainly qualified as a special occasion. He proudly hugged his son. Harry was then face to face with Dan. I finished what you started, Dan. They paid for attacking our family. Harry then felt a hand on his arm, and looked around to see Emma staring into his face. Her hand pulled Harry down until he was level with her and guided his head into her embrace. Harry was being cuddled by the woman he now considered his mum, while looking into the smiling face of his mate. Hermione was receiving the exact same treatment on Emma's other side. Dan glanced at the three smiling faces and relaxed for the first time since those goblins burst into their home. Minerva couldn't believe how solemn the atmosphere was in the Great Hall, and all because a Muggle woman had been attacked by some rogue goblins. She then had to reconsider that thought as she realized how many of the children currently in the care of Hogwarts actually knew Emma Granger. From the head boy and girl down, this woman had touched the lives of a fair number of them, between holidays and birthday parties in Kingersea where an entire year group were invited. Of all the children affected though, none were more so than the little blonde sitting at the Ravenclaw table cuddling the black cat for comfort. A fact the head girl had picked up on, and Penelope was sitting right beside Luna. She was stroking Moonlight and trying to think positive thoughts about Emma. She simply had to recover. Having already lost her mother, Luna couldn't bear to see the woman who'd started to fill that void in her life leave too. Hermione was like a sister to Luna, and she knew just how close her sister was to Emma. She would hate for Hermione to undergo the same terrible experience as her. The snowy white owl flying into the halls stopped all conversation. Every pair of eyes were now locked on Luna as she removed the note from Irgit's leg. Those who couldn't see the girl's face feared the worst as she began sobbing. Those who could relaxed as they saw a beaming smile on Luna's face. She managed to say Emma's going to be okay before the hall erupted with cheering. Minerva thought her surprises were now over for the day. Augusta spoiled that idea immediately. I'll cover the Muggle Studies classes until Sirius returns. That will just leave history students needing supervised. With Madame Augusta Longbottom now apparently able to teach Muggle Studies, Minerva was left wondering where all these changes would eventually lead. A complication no one had expected was the police being involved. Dan firing his shotgun in the house, and a few of their closest neighbors dialing 999. When the police arrived at the scene, they found the Grangers gone and a bloody mess left in their lounge. Barchoke's squad had apprehended the prisoners and removed the bodies, but the police were at the Grangers before any cleanup could be done. By the time Amelia discovered what had happened, it was far too late to start obliviating people. Where the police go, the press are sure to follow, especially where there is blood involved. There had been rumors circulating that the Potter the serial killers were after had connections to Crawley. This appeared to confirm that, and the Grangers were front-page news all over the country. Speculation regarding their fate was wide, varied and totally inaccurate. They were officially listed as missing though, and a manhunt was gathering pace, so something had to be done. This led to Arthur and Bill Weasley walking into Crawley's police station and approaching the front desk, flashing charmed ID. Arthur spoke to the police officer, who greeted them. "We need to speak to whoever is in charge of the Granger case." They were shown into an office and introduced themselves to the detectives in charge, their identifications claiming both father and son worked for a branch of the government. "I have here a press release that will answer most of the questions being bandied about in the media. Please read it and then we'll answer any questions we can." Arthur handed copies of the document over and tried not to smirk as the detective's eyebrows got higher and higher. On the 19th of September, a heavily armed group managed to bypass the security arrangements on the Granger home. While one of the group was busy boasting what they were going to do to the couple, Daniel Granger managed to bring his shotgun into play, fatally wounding two of the would-be attackers. This also alerted the private firm who were part of the security surrounding the Grangers, and the rest of the group were quickly detained. Unfortunately, Emma Granger was seriously wounded in the attack, and required immediate medical attention. She is now expected to make a full recovery. Both are recuperating from the attack by staying on a private estate in the Scottish Highlands. This statement is being released to assure all their friends and family that they are alive and well, and also hopefully to end media speculation over this incident. The more senior of the two detectives was obviously not local. He also appeared to resent having his very high-profile murder-kidnapping case pulled out from under him. He was barely courteous when asking the first question. "Can you give us any details on Mrs. Granger's injuries?" Arthur wanted to set the tone of this meeting right from the start. The Weasleys were in charge here. First, you need to understand what level this investigation has now reached. This is being treated as a direct attack on Lord Potter. We'll tell you what we can, and also what can be released to the press. Emma took a knife to the stomach, an injury that could easily have killed her. His subordinate tried to hide his smirk. He'd basically been given the same "this is no longer your responsibility" speech when his colleague had arrived from London. He also had the next question ready for the new team apparently now in charge of this case. "Can you confirm or deny that Miss Granger's boyfriend, this young Lord Potter, is the Potter these serial killers are after?" Looking to his son, Bill nodded before answering that question. Hermione's boyfriend is indeed the Potter these killers are after. The couple met over 2 years ago at their exclusive school and have been inseparable ever since. Her parents were made aware of the possible danger and had all the protection we could think of on their home. That was why Dan, a keen shooter, also had a shotgun handy. Harry made sure that Emma had world-class care to treat her injury, and it's his Highland estate that they're staying on at the moment. That can also be released to the press and might stop some of the rubbish they're printing every day. Can you explain why they're after the boy? It was Arthur who tried to put the situation into a form that wouldn't break the statute of secrecy, but was close enough to the truth for these two detectives to believe. Harry's parents worked for the government, a branch of anti-terrorism. They were so good at their jobs that a really nasty group made it their mission in life to wipe the Potters out. They almost succeeded too. Both Harry's parents were killed, and the explosion also took out the gang's leader. Harry was in the house at the time, and it's nothing short of a miracle he survived. Bill was so proud of his father. Arthur had worked really hard on the Muggle materials he'd provided. He'd stopped treating Muggles as a bit of a hobby, and there was now little sign of the man who couldn't pronounce electricity. Gone too were the plug and battery collections. His new hobby was collecting Muggle devices and experimenting to produce a magical version. Arthur was determined Molly would one day have a working microwave. He just loved the ping that signaled your food was ready. He was also imparting truthful information to the police officers without giving specifics away. The government rounded up as many of this gang as we could while toddler Harry was adopted by a friend of the family. This gang, though, would give fanatics a bad name, and the escapees are trying to link up with former members who must have slipped through our nets over a decade ago. The senior detective opened a slim file that had been sitting on his desk. One of the first things he did upon arrival was to scour through all the information they had on this family. This report begins to make more sense now. How one lad easily took down 5 local bullies. I understand Lord Potter was asked by the officers who took them home to the Grangers if he had any special training. Our records show he said no. Arthur hadn't a clue what the detective was talking about, but thankfully Bill had gone over the entire incident in great detail with all of them. Harry was asked if he practiced any kind of martial arts. He replied that apart from keeping fit, fencing was the only sport he attempted. That is as true today as it was then. Due to his special circumstances, though, Harry has received government-approved training on how to extract himself from difficult situations. Since he and his best friends are always together, they received approval to undertake the training too. Hermione was more upset with herself that she let that boy catch her off guard in that incident and accepted as her due the rolling she got from her tutor for doing so. The younger local detective was suspicious of such a glib answer. You seem to know rather a lot about this. Probably because I was the tutor who gave her a rollicking. I know the Granger family well. I've holidayed with them and have younger siblings who attend the same school as Hermione and Harry. I spoke with Dan and Emma this morning before setting out for your station. Emma is actually going to try some solid food today. Bill didn't want to say he had breakfast with them, or an explanation of how he got from the Scottish Highlands to Crawley in such a short time would be required. Would it be possible for us to contact them? A rather emphatic shake of the head from Bill preceded his answer. Sorry, but no. Both are understandably rather shaken up at the moment, and Harry's being exceptionally protective of them. We all know how easily it could have been for things to go so differently the other night. Dan has barely let his shotgun out of his reach. A very calm Dan had his shotgun resting at his shoulder. Pull. He smiled as each blast of the shotgun saw a clay pigeon disintegrate. Pull. Another 2 clay pigeons met their end under his gun, as once more his little loader swiftly and smoothly passed over loaded weapon. Pull. One smashed to smithereens and the other merely clipped. It was still good shooting, though. A certain goblin observer thought it was shocking and amazing at the same time. There was no way Ragnarok wasn't going to further investigate guns after seeing how effective they were against goblins. Watching Dan shoot was a revelation. As with Harry's demonstration of his abilities in the pit, here again it was a case of their weapons being seriously outmatched in a fight. The sharpest sword in the world was as much use to a warrior as a dandelion if your enemy could cut you down well before your blade could even reach them. But Choke rested his weapon as he'd been taught before, giving the command to set the clay pigeons flying. Shooting with a director studying his every move was nerve-wracking. Rather than trying for both and hitting none, he concentrated on making sure only one of those discs would hit the ground whole. Ragnarok actually cheered as he witnessed a goblin blast one of those discs apart. Choke made sure the weapon was unloaded before handing it over for the director to examine. The workmanship is superb. It must have taken days to get those barrels so true. Why did you remove the bits that fire, though? The leader of the Goblin Nation then found himself being lectured by a human as Dan explained the safety protocols everyone had to learn before handling a loaded weapon. He also shattered Ragnarok's illusions by telling him most of the shotgun he held in his hands would have been produced by machine. Rather than raising any level of anxiety, the echo of the shotgun's blasts was actually reassuring to the other half of the Granger dentistry duo. Dan, practicing on his beloved shooting course, was a welcome slice of what now passed as normality for them. She was sitting in her favorite chair with a book in her hands, but Emma couldn't stop her thoughts from running over the last few days. Once it had been established beyond doubt she was out of danger, Sirius and Henrika took Neville and Padma back to Hogwarts. Hermione and Harry had refused to leave, and even now they had transferred to Kingersea. Both were still here, keeping a very careful eye on her. Emma suddenly sussed what had disturbed her quiet reading. It was far too quiet for a room that held both her children. She turned her head round to look for them, and let go with an incredibly loud, piercing scream. Dobby had Dan transported there in mere seconds, his shotgun searching for targets. All he saw was Harry and Hermione standing in front of Emma with their weapons drawn. Tonks coming barreling through the door almost started a war before Emma screamed again. "Stop! Weapons down before anyone gets hurt." Emma's screamed order proved to be timely. Sensing no threat, everyone complied. Just before Barchoke, Ragnarok and a pair of the director's guards crashed into the room from the other direction than the one Tonks had burst through. "I'm sorry for startling everyone, I just got a bit of a shock. Guess I'm not dealing with this as well as I thought I was." Dobby popped away with the shotgun as the Potter elves began supplying refreshments. Since the situation was under control, the 2 guards positioned themselves at the doors as a now embarrassed Emma provided an explanation. "It suddenly dawned on me that it was too quiet in here with this pair in the room. I turned around and saw what I now know was Hermione, but she was covered in feathers. I simply got a shock. Sorry for scaring everyone. We were meditating on our animagus forms." "Was Hermione really covered in feathers? Didn't you see her?" "Sorry, Mum. After you screamed I was too busy sweeping my side of the room for threats. I didn't need to look to know Hermione was doing the same behind me." Hermione now held out her arm and concentrated. Copper-colored feathers with distinct black markings started to spread along her outstretched limb. She was soon in the air as Harry had his arms around her waist and was swinging her around in celebration, his whoop of jubilation letting the uninitiated know this was a major achievement. Tonks was shaking her head in wonder. "Let me guess, Neville and Padma have forms too." Harry still had Hermione hoisted in the air, his admiration of his mate clear for all to see. Hermione is a kestrel, I'm a swift. Neville is a tawny owl while Padma is some type of hawk. We'll need to wait until she perfects her form to get a more specific identification. I can't wait until we can all fly around the glen, might save Padma moaning about having to run as much. The thought of their children being able to change themselves into birds and having the ability to fly unaided just gave a whole new meaning to the term flying the nest. For Dan and Emma, here was a graphic example of not only how quickly they were growing up, but they were now trying to grow feathers too. Ragnarok was once again witnessing proof of just how well his gamble on these 4 human children was paying off. An Amagus was an ability that was foreign to goblins, but having 3 friends of the nation, and a centurion who would possess this strange phenomenon would be another feather in his cap. He had considered these children extraordinary when he made the awards. Just how extraordinary they were turning out to be was surprising even him. It was no surprise to Emma that the extraordinary man she had married all those years ago eventually broke down and cried his heart out. Her Dan was a gentle soul, and, while he wouldn't hesitate to protect his family, killing 2 people was always going to have an effect on him. She held her husband close as they snuggled in bed. Getting Dan to talk through the experience had led to this breakdown. He badly needed to let it out though. After getting himself together and reluctantly admitting to his wife he actually felt better, they snuggled a while longer before Emma raised the next potential problem. I think Harry needs to do the same as you just have, instead of bottling it up and going on as if everything is fine. You reacted purely on instinct, but by all accounts, Harry practically slaughtered those goblins in front of a large audience. You'll get no argument from me that those 4 deserved their fate. I'm just not happy that our boy had to be the one administering it. I've had a quiet word with Barchoke and he agrees. He also thinks Hermione is the only one who stands any chance of getting through to him. I guessed as much. I also guessed that's why she was sneaking into his room every night. I didn't think you'd noticed. Why didn't you say anything? Only being able to hold you at night has kept me sane these last few days. I keep getting flashbacks and watching those 2 goblins die. If Harry feels half as bad as I do about this, then he'll need Hermione to get him through this. I also think that's why they're in no hurry at all to return to Hogwarts. He doesn't really want to face all their friends knowing what he had to do. I know that's the way I feel about returning to Crawley. People who could never understand what we went through will want to congratulate me for picking up my shotgun. So you trust those 2 together? Harry has now killed 5 times to protect the 2 most important women in the world. To me, make that 7, if you count a basilisk and a troll. If we can't trust him with Hermione, then just class me as a horrible father. This earned Dan a kiss from his wife. I think you forgot to add that Hermione and I are 2 of the most important ladies in Harry's life too. We both know there is not the slightest danger of him hurting our daughter. We also know they can't go on like this much longer. Both of them and Tonks need to be in Hogwarts for the ball on Saturday evening. It would make a mockery of the event if 3 of the guests of honor were missing. Barchoke and I have an idea for Friday. I just need you to go along with it. Barchoke arrived in Kinkusi on Friday morning accompanied by a surprising bonus. Hermione was out her chair while shrieking Sapphire in a tone that could crack glass. The little goblin was now a fully paid-up member of the Hagzagood Society and, as Hermione eventually released her, she flew into Harry's open arms. Her head barely reached his muscled chest, but Sapphire held on tight as she finally answered some of the questions. Hermione had immediately hit her with, "Your mate here started a mad scramble to get back to London. My whole family's here to get ready for next week. Anyone waiting until the last minute is going to be disappointed. I've never seen Gringotts so busy. We could hardly get accommodation. You're more than welcome to stay here." She looked up into her tall friend's green eyes, and knew he was being completely genuine. That he hadn't let her go yet was also a big clue too. "Thanks, Harry, I might for a day or 2. Your father has also offered that I can stay in your apartment. Save me having to share a room with the rest of my family." She then got really serious and changed the subject. Even in Cairo, your fight in the pit was all anyone could talk about. There are memory crystals changing hands at ridiculous amounts as everyone wants to see if the rumors are true. My father got his hands on a copy and it left him clearly shaken, so much so that I was able to sneak a look at it when he wasn't there. She could feel Harry trying to pull away at hearing that, but Sapphire just tightened her grip on his waist. Harry, you did what you had to do. We both know Dragonbreath was going to meet a bad end. He didn't hesitate in trying to murder Emma, so don't you go blaming yourself for what happened to him. Hermione now made it a three-way hug, delighted with what their little friend was saying. I've been trying to tell him that all week, Sapphire. I was there and it makes no difference to me. He seems to think it will make a difference to our friends. Padma and Neville were there too, and both have already told him that's not going to happen. Here was the opening. Emma was looking forward to introduce their idea. Since you won't be able to leave Hogwarts this year at Halloween, I thought now would be a good time to visit Harry's parents. Hermione explained that concept to a confused Sapphire, allowing Harry a few moments to think about it. Harry visits the cemetery where his parents are buried, usually on Halloween. This year though, Halloween is a Hogsmeade weekend, and the goblins are going to help protect the village. Centurion Crow here is going to be on duty. Barchoke then helped his son reach a decision. As the entire country now knows that fact, visiting on a different day also makes tactical sense. Sapphire and Hermione holding him lent Harry the courage to agree. The guilt he was currently carrying made visiting his parents the last place he wanted to go. Harry's reluctance at the cemetery was clear to all those who had visited here with him before. Hermione and Sapphire kept a tight hold of him as they stood beside the headstones. The fact that his son was standing there in silence forced Barchoke to take some action. James and Lily, our son is being rather quiet today, because he had to do something that's left him feeling ashamed, unworthy even. We've all told him that he's still the same Harry we know and love, but he doesn't seem to believe us. You left me a fine boy to raise and I've done the best I can. If there is any fault here, then it is mine to bear. Emma's hand then rested supportively on the elder goblin's shoulder as she too spoke. James and Lily, I hope you don't mind if I say our son too. Harry started calling me Mum and I couldn't be happier about that. I think his father has done a wonderful job, as Harry is quite simply the finest young man I have ever met. If there's a fault here, then it's mine. I was attacked and Harry not only helped save my life, but ensured my attackers would never bother anyone again. I already loved our son with all my heart, and this incident didn't lessen that love one bit. Harry though is having trouble believing that. As Harry still hadn't spoken a word, Hermione filled the silence. I really don't know what to call you. Mr. and Mrs. Potter seems so formal, yet James and Lily doesn't feel right either. It will be Mum and Dad when I marry your son, and I will be marrying him. He is mine and I am his. Nothing is going to change that. He seems to think his recent actions have affected how we all see him. I keep trying to tell him that his friends and family all still love him, and will never stop loving him. With tears rolling down his cheeks, Harry finally broke his silence. Mum, Dad, I've let you down. I've let everyone down. You both gave your lives protecting me from a dark wizard, only for your son to turn into one. I slaughtered 4 people. One of them a boy who wouldn't even fight back. Sobs now racked Harry's body as his worst fears left his lips. Hermione was strong for her mate, fighting back her own tears. You are not a dark wizard, Harry, and you never could be. You are a centurion who dealt with a goblin problem as only a goblin could. She'd been standing back, not wanting to intrude on a family moment, but Tonks now stepped forward to offer some advice. She had watched as the rest of the family had used Harry's parents to try and reach out to the young man. Tonks now did the same. James and Lily, you don't know me, but my aura robes will tell you we have a mutual acquaintance, Alistair Moody. If anyone can spot a dark wizard, then it's him that he's going to train. Your son should answer that question. Harry has been raised as a goblin but is now trying to assign wizarding values to his goblin actions. It just won't work. Harry was still crying, but he could feel the love he was surrounded by, almost as if it was a physical force. This atmosphere allowed him to begin unburdening his soul of the day that would give him nightmares for years to come. As Harry got into his stride, there was soon more than him standing in the graveyard with tears in their eyes, especially when he reached the part about seeing Emma injured. When I saw Mum lying there with that knife sticking out her eye, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't lose my mum again. How could I ever face my Hermione knowing that because of me both of us no longer had a mum? I had to protect them and acted as a goblin should. Why do I then feel as if I've ripped my own guts out too? His father had an answer for that. Taking a life should always leave you feeling like that, son. It's never something that can be taken lightly. The people you killed had already been sentenced to die. I'm sorrier than I can say that you had to be the one to carry that sentence out. You did your duty, son, and the nation is a better place because of that. Sapphire spoke for the first time, her heart breaking from witnessing the pain her friend was suffering. The nation is a better place now, Harry, and your family is certainly safer because of what you were forced to do. Listen to those around you and don't hand your hard-won victory over to Dragon Breath. He and his father got exactly what they deserved. It was a lovely autumn day in Godric's Hollow, and the well-maintained cemetery sparkled like an emerald, set squarely at the heart of the village. The more time they spent there with Harry talking to his parents, the more the sparkle returned to those emerald eyes. Hermione loved so much. Harry felt lighter as they returned to King Gussie. He was also knackered and was heading off for a nap. Hermione had every intention of joining him but had something to do first. Father, can you get a dress made for Sapphire by tomorrow? Since she's in the country, so Sapphire can be our guest at tomorrow's Merlin Ball. Are you sure Hogwarts is ready for this, my daughter? All our friends have met and love Sapphire. They'll all be there. Fred and George might act all respectable now, but everyone knows they've just gotten a lot better at what they do since taking lessons from Master Pitsley. Nobody will want to cross that pair. What do you say, Sapphire? Me and you walking into the ball on Harry's arms? The little goblin was almost hyperventilating with excitement and only had one question. Will Roger be there? Having holidayed with the group in Cairo, Barchok was now certain his daughter was right. They would rally around Sapphire and ensure she had an enjoyable and trouble-free evening. He would take her to Gringotts and have a dress made in the same style as those Hermione and Padma would be wearing. Having to return Sapphire to Kingashi might be the only reason he got out of the director's office without having to consume a keg of grog. Ragnarok would surely call for the potent brew to celebrate a goblin being invited to the Hogwarts Merlin Ball, with Gringotts currently packed to capacity with all of the overseas visitors. This couldn't have happened at a more opportune time to allow their visitors to see the unbelievable changes happening in Britain for themselves. They all noticed the changes at breakfast. It was hard not to, with Harry, Hermione and Tonks wearing their orders of Merlin and greeting each other formally at the table. Add in Sapphire being high as a kite with the excitement of attending her first ball tonight, and breakfast in Kingassy that Saturday morning was unusual to say the least. The three parents were all smiling as their charges were making plans to spend a couple of hours giving Sapphire some dancing lessons. Dan and Emma lost their smiles as Hermione revealed more of their plans. After the ball, we'll portkey home. That will allow the four of us. A growl from Tonks saw Hermione change that part. That will allow the five of us to attend church tomorrow. They could see the fear in Emma's eyes, and it was Harry who broached the elephant in the room. Mum, you got me to face my fears yesterday and I feel so much better for doing it. You know any of my houses are available to you, but your life is back in Crawley. Even if you want to permanently change that, you still need to go back and sort everything out first. She found herself being tag-teamed by both of them as Hermione pushed too. You'll have Harry and me with you, and Tonks guarding our backs. We go to church. A quick pop home before heading back to Kingassy for lunch. Dan now had his arms supportively around his wife's shoulders. We have to face this sometime, love. Wouldn't it be much better to do it with these three there for support? Just look at those medals. You know we'll be in safe hands. She was every bit as reluctant as Harry had been yesterday, but again Emma knew this was something she needed to face. Dan was right. It would be much better with their family there for support. With that settled, the three teams left so Sapphire could get some dancing practice for her first ball. She had loved dinner and dancing on their Nile cruise, but the little goblin wanted to be more prepared for her first ball. Nothing could have prepared Sapphire for walking into the Great Hall of Hogwarts. It wasn't so much the splendor of the vast room, more that every pair of eyes in the hall focused on them the instant they entered. The little goblin was feeling self-conscious about wearing this dress. but had trusted Harry and Hermione when they said that's what most of the girls would be wearing. She stood as the 6 Order of Merlin holders observed their formal greetings before the whole thing descended into hugs. Sapphire soon found herself being included by an excited Padma, and then Luna arrived to carry on that trend. Sapphire watched as Harry spoke to the woman in charge before leading everyone out of there to climb lots of stairs as Hogwarts once more provided a spectacular ballroom. Luna had been introducing her to so many friends of theirs that Sapphire's head was spinning. She found herself being led to a table where dinner would appear. She was sitting between Luna and Harry, with Padma, Neville and of course Hermione making up the rest of the company. They were surrounded though on all sides by tables full of their friends, and Sapphire couldn't help but smile as 2 younger girls approached Harry to remind him he had promised them a dance. It was like watching the last of the doubt leave her friend. One glance at Hermione was enough to tell that she thought so too. She knew what they had for dinner was lovely, but Sapphire couldn't remember what she ate. She was far too busy looking all around her as Luna kept up a running commentary and answered any questions she asked. And Sapphire had a lot of questions about everything and everyone. It was announced that the first dance was for the Order of Merlin holders, and there was loud cheering as 4 students, 3 professors and an Auror took to the dance floor. Hermione was in Harry's arms and they were surrounded by friends and family. She looked into her mate's eyes and saw peace there for the first time since her birthday. I hate saying I told you so, but did you really think your friends would treat you any different? You'll make Natalie and Pauline's evenings by dancing with them, and Sapphire is sitting there practically glowing. You've never hidden the fact you consider yourself a goblin. You told the entire hall that at your sorting. Sometimes we can all forget though, even you. Not as long as I have you to keep me right. It was also you who invited Sapphire here tonight, something I want to thank you for. What I'm trying to say is thanks for being there for me this week. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't. I'll always be there for you, Harry. I am yours and you are mine. We're going to have to wait a few more years though before we can snuggle up in bed every night. Although we weren't doing anything wrong, I really don't like sneaking about behind Mum and Dad's back. This earned her a kiss from her mate. I know, and again I can't thank you enough. Just you being there with me kept me sane. Tonks was enjoying being held in her date's arms. She wanted to know if there could be more though. Remus, I need to return to Kingersea with Harry tonight, but we'll be back in Hogwarts ready for classes on Monday. I think we need to sit down then and have a talk. She was really worried, until Remus smiled at her. Then Tonks knew it would be okay. Even if they went no further than their current friendship, she knew Remus Lupin was going to be a part of her life for years to come. The ball was a resounding success again. That there was an actual goblin amongst them barely raised an eyebrow. Word had quickly spread Sapphire was a very good friend of Harry's. That he danced with her next after his first dance with Hermione easily confirmed this, with some of the professors and even the head boy and girl clearly having met her before. Sapphire was afforded a warm welcome to Hogwarts and was on the dance floor for most of evening. Sirius asked Hermione to dance, and was relieved to hear that Harry was now on the mend. He had killed in the last war, and even though that person had been in full Death Eater regalia, and taking part in a raid, Sirius had still felt like shit, knowing he had caused someone's death. He also approved of what they were doing for her mum and dad, asking if they wanted some company at the church. Hermione was sorely tempted, but eventually declined. It was going to be enough of a dog and pony show without turning up mob-handed. The thought of Melissa and Joanne turning green with envy when they saw Henrika almost had her saying yes. Those bound for Kingersea eventually had to bid their friends good night. Sapphire was proclaiming to everyone within earshot that it was the best night of her life, Hermione leaning over and whispering in her ear that this ball was an annual event, and of course she was invited next year, saw her dancing all the way to the edge of the wards. She had a whole year to work on her father to make sure she was in Britain at the same time next year. Her father was studying Sunday's edition of The Prophet and was struggling to believe what his eyes were telling him. His daughter's picture was on the front page. He'd half expected pictures proclaiming outrage at a goblin daring to attend Hogwarts' premiere event. Only Barchoke reiterating his promise that she would be perfectly safe saw him giving permission for his daughter to attend. No. Instead of singling her out, this picture was much worse. He wasn't to know this was a repeat of the type of picture they had successfully ran after last year's ball. A mass of Hogwarts students gathered in front of an impressive fountain. There, left of center, was Sapphire, happily standing amongst the collection of smiling young witches and wizards. He had to read well into the article before finding any mention of his daughter, and even then she was simply mentioned as a longtime friend of the Baron of Kingersea, who happened to be currently holidaying in Britain. He held irrefutable proof in his hands that these witches and wizards had easily accepted his goblin daughter in their company, again something he simply didn't think was possible. Not for the first time lately he was left to wonder if he'd made a mistake all those years ago. Emma was clinging onto Dan's arm and wondering if they'd made a mistake. Like Sapphire last night, they were experiencing the phenomenon of having every pair of eyes focused on them as they walked into church. The Reverend Richards actually announced during his sermon that he had been going to ask the congregation to pray for a couple of their members who had been attacked last week, only for his prayers to have already been answered when he saw them sitting in their usual seats. After the service ended, it was then that the group found themselves being approached by most of the congregation. Dan lost count of the number of times he told people that they were only visiting their home. They would be staying in the Scottish Highlands and dental agency staff would be covering their practice for the next few weeks at least. It was the Reverend Richards, though, who made the most perceptive comment as they were leaving the church. I was dismayed to discover that it was members of Harry's own family who pointed these terrorists at Crawley and your family. That was very irresponsible of them. Harry, though, who quickly put the minister straight. The Dursleys are no family of mine, Reverend. They signed that right away when they put me up for adoption. I said the same to Melissa and Joanne during the summer, and also expressed my concern that their revelations might attract these terrorists to Crawley. Dan clearly shared Harry's view of the Dursleys. They must have known what they were doing would place my family in the firing line. They either did it deliberately or just didn't care. Whatever their motives, I'm finding it hard to offer any forgiveness in their direction at the moment. As the Reverend Richards shook Dan's hand, he found himself agreeing with his parishioner, who almost lost his wife a few days ago. I really can't blame any of you for that. As they walked back to the Granger's house, Tonks had to bring up something that was bothering her. It wasn't Death Eaters who attacked Emma. Whoever the Dursleys are, they had nothing to do with the other night. A mischievous smile stole across Harry's face. The Dursleys deliberately started spreading that information, trying to justify themselves for giving me away when I was a toddler. This was not done out of any spirit of public service. Everyone in town now knows it was them who directed the eyes of Britain onto Crawley and just what the consequences of that could be. The Dursleys standing in Crawley probably couldn't get any lower, and they did it themselves. I hardly had to do anything. This drew a smile from Emma. She considered that the tormentors of her daughter receiving some tormenting of their own was poetic justice. Emma's smile at the Dursleys' situation meant this morning would be classed as a success. They had shown face and everyone now knew they were all right. All they had to do now was get back to Scotland before the police or press got wind. They were in Crawley. They would have lunch in Kingersea before Hermione and Tonks needed to head back to Hogwarts. Petunia had rushed to the school as soon as she got the phone call. If her little Deedums was injured, then her little soldier would need his mummy. She was in tears after being shown into the first aid room to meet her beloved offspring. "Oh, my precious baby, what have they done to you?" He was holding an ice pack over one eye to try and reduce the swelling, while Dudley had obviously been bleeding from his lip and nose. There were also vivid scratches down his cheek that left Petunia asking if her son had been attacked by some sort of wild animal. The school's first aider had learned early on after taking on these duties not to get involved in this side of the equation. He was here to fix the injuries and leave dealing with irate parents to the school's guidance staff. Thankfully, Miss Adams turned up mere moments later. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Mrs. Dursley. I had to deal with some rather distressed girls first. Did they witness what happened to my Dudley? I would think that would be enough to distress anyone, let alone 4 young girls seeing what happened to their friend. Hasn't Dudley told you what happened?" The silence told its own story, forcing the teacher to tell the tale. "There were a number of students at the school unhappy that your family basically provided the information that led to the terrible attack on the Grangers. Rather than being contrite about the affair, Dudley voiced his opinion that the attack should have happened sooner, before the Granger's teenage daughter returned to her private school. As you can perhaps imagine, that did not go down too well with Miss Granger's friends. You see the results before you. Are you saying that those 4 girls did this just because of something my Dudley said? When the teacher nodded in answer, that was Petunia's signal to explode. And just what are you and the school going to do about this? I think it's disgraceful that you allowed my Dudley to be attacked just because he expressed his opinion. When that opinion is absolutely abhorrent to everyone who hears it, then I think the girls' reactions were understandable. Not excusable, though. As soon as we're finished here, they will be sent home with a letter to their parents, explaining what happened today. Where was this abhorrent reaction when my son and his friends were attacked by Granger and her gang outside the cinema? Tony Dillon was in hospital for weeks and his family left so traumatized they moved from the area. I'm sorry, Mrs. Dursley. I don't know anything about that. I'm assuming this incident happened before Dudley came to us at Hazelwick. The distraught mother didn't want to hear excuses. Petunia wanted something done. He wouldn't have been here at all if that bloody great hole hadn't opened up and swallowed half our house. My Dudley was down to attend a private school before that pit ate all our savings and forced us to remortgage. Come on, Dudley, we're going to see the doctor and have your injuries treated properly. My husband will be in touch, Miss Adams. You haven't heard the last of this. They left the first aider to tidy up behind them. This saw him muttering to his colleague. You wonder how some kids are the way they are. And then you meet the parents, and you just know. They don't care that a woman nearly died because of them, but a few scratches on their precious son, and they want us to call the armed forces in to deal with it. A firing squad at dawn for the girls who dared to hit their precious son. The guidance teacher privately agreed, and now she had to go and deal with the young ladies who'd set about the fat bully. Dudley thought he was safe mouthing off while surrounded by his friend's gang. Those same students wanted nothing to do with a quartet of screaming and scratching girls. Dudley had found himself having to deal with the situation on his own, eventually being reduced to running away crying to tell a teacher. Padma felt like running away for a good cry, something her sister picked up on immediately. That the other 3 didn't look much better set. Parvati off. What has that madman got you doing now? It must be bad to affect the 4 of you like this. Neville's arm had never left his mate's shoulders, down 7 flights of stairs, and now sitting down to lunch. Padma certainly needed his support today. Moody was teaching us about the unforgivables this morning. The silence that followed Neville's answer was total. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room to leave a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, although Luna's voice was barely above a whisper as she tried to confirm what they'd just heard. He didn't have you casting them, did he? All the friends could hear the crack in Hermione's voice as she answered. No, Luna, he decimated all 3 of them on a spider. Padma's voice did break as she said the next bit. She also pushed the food in front of her away. She wouldn't be eating lunch today, none of them would. They had to take it further though, and then started casting the Imperious Honors. I looked into my Neville's eyes when he was under that curse and didn't recognize who I saw there. That to me was worse than having the curse cast on myself. Parvati now had her arms around a crying Padma, as did Neville. Parvati though was in fighting mood. What gives that bastard the right to do that? Shouldn't he be heading off for a stay in Azkaban about now? Padma was now clinging to Neville, burying her face in his chest in the hope their friends wouldn't see her tears and to give herself a chance to recover her composure. Neville held her close as he answered Parvati's angry question. He's a Master Auror and is allowed to cast the curse for training purposes, providing the person grants their permission. We all gave our permission. Our orders of Merlin allow us to do that. They had been joined by Sirius, Hendrika, and Remus, all of whom had made their way over, after spotting the obvious distress amongst the 4. It's part of Auror training that Moody pushed through during the last war. That curse was having devastating effects all over the country. Moody successfully argued that the Auror force needed to know how to defeat it. And the only way to do that is have someone cast it on you in a controlled environment. I know how you feel, Padma. I had to undergo the same training before I became an Auror. Parvati took no comfort from Sirius's well-intentioned words. Her sister was in pain. Again. You can't know how it feels. She may have an order of Merlin. But that doesn't change the fact that she's only 13. She shouldn't be having to do all this bloody training. None of them should. Padma had managed to pull herself together enough to answer for herself. She took her twin's hand and gave it a squeeze of thanks. I know you're trying to look out for me, Parvati, and I love you for that. I'm going to be a Longbottom though, and the Death Eaters want to see that family wiped out almost as much as they do the Potters. Anyone wanting to get their hands on my Neville is going to have to go through me first, and I aim to make that as difficult as possible by training to be the best I can be. We had already worked out the stuff Moody was throwing at us was straight out the Auror manuals. That just surprised us today. Probably because that isn't in those manuals. Do I want to know how you four managed to get your hands on a set? Probably not. Sirius. Probably not. Harry was angry more than anything else at the moment, angry at himself. Hermione's bracelet had provided enough protection for her to throw the curse off by its second application, Harry's armor allowing him to do the same by the third. They were then reduced to standing watching as their friends suffered under that vile curse. Moody might only have had them acting silly, but they all knew the potential was there to do much worse. There would be a letter heading to his father today. Neville and Padma would both have some protection before their tutor walked back into Hogwarts. Their status as friends of the nation meant there would be no problems with providing goblin protection. It would be a different case for the rest of their friends, though. That was something only the director could make a decision on. Augustus and Bella had reached the same decision as Peter, that it was better to take the train through the Alps than walk. Unlike Peter, though, there was no hiding below containers of a freight train for these two. Using the same procedures that had worked so well on the cross-channel ferry, they were now sitting in what was effectively their own private compartment. Rookwood had even chanced leaving his mate alone while he visited the buffet car, meaning they were sitting down and eating the first food they hadn't heated themselves for weeks. Not that they were complaining about the packets of provisions they'd stolen from the Muggle camping shop. It may look nothing like it was supposed to, but the food still tasted better than anything they'd been fed in Azkaban for the last decade. That they would eat their food outside and in each other's company meant that they would have enjoyed anything put in front of them. Augustus thought their time away from Azkaban had done his mate the power of good, a couple of months of fresh air and decent food. Not forgetting there were now no Dementors hanging around them 24 hours a day, and Bella was blossoming into the beautiful witch she'd been before their enforced island holiday. If my big strong wizard keeps looking at me like that, we might just have to christen this compartment. I've never done it on a train before. These seats will certainly be more comfortable than our sleeping bags on the ground. Rookwood thought here was something else the Muggles had gotten right. It said first class on the compartment door, and he certainly couldn't think of a better way to travel than this. He quickly reinforced the notice me not charms on the door and windows. There wasn't a hope in hell Augustus was going to turn down his mate's offer. It was beginning to look like every goblin on the planet had headed to London for the offer of free gold. Neither Harry nor Hermione had wanted to miss their training, but both also wanted to appear in Gringotts today. So it was dinner time before they entered the bank. The young couple were astonished at what they found as soon as they left the public facade of the bank behind. The atmosphere was almost carnival in nature. Children of any persuasion are going to be bored stiff queuing for hours, even with the prospect of free gold at the end of their wait. As the queue snaked further than could be seen in the tunnels, disgruntled children should have been everywhere. Instead, at every nook and cranny there would be vendors selling their wares. Whether that was food, drinks, or trinkets, toys was immaterial. It kept the children entertained and waiting to see what the next one was selling. In some of the bigger spaces there were swings and even a merry-go-round available. A group performing a favored children's story on a makeshift stage were proving very popular, since all these attractions were keeping their children amused, and the cost involved a mere fraction of what was waiting for them at the end of the queue. The parents were more than happy to indulge their children today. This had the knock-on effect of making those children and the vendors very happy too. The entire event was becoming one giant party. Harry and Hermione were of course being recognized. The epaulets on the shoulders of his tunic proclaimed him a centurion, as the only centurion not born a goblin then. Harry's identity wasn't exactly hard to determine. The witch proudly walking beside him, wearing dueling robes and with a goblin blade at her hip, could only be the centurion's mate, Hermione Granger. That same Hermione Granger was suddenly greeted by an excited squeal as a goblin the couple knew well shot out the queue to hug them. If anyone was surprised at a centurion hugging this young female goblin, no one said anything about it. "Oh, I was hoping I would see you here today. Isn't this just brilliant? I can't believe the size of the queue. I thought most of the children would have reached the goal by now." "They have, Hermione. This is our third time. And Father reckons there may be enough gold left for one more trip. You should have seen it. There was a bloody mountain of the stuff. You get a bag, its size depending on your age, and then you're allowed to fill it." They didn't want anyone hurting themselves by trying to drag away more than they could carry. After depositing your new gold, it's straight to the back of the queue for another bag. Both were then practically dragged across to meet her two younger siblings and four awestruck cousins. Hermione now understood why Harry was politely ignoring Sapphire's father. The next move was Goldskin's to make. They didn't have long to wait. Everywhere Goldskin looked, he saw more and more evidence of how Britain was changing. He didn't need do much searching to discover who was at the heart of most of these changes. With Sapphire clearly acknowledged in both worlds as one of Crow's closest friends, it was now way past time he buried his animosity toward the Centurion. Since arriving in London, he had managed to procure a memory crystal of Crow's first fight in the pit. He had even allowed Sapphire to watch the part where her friend's bonding was displayed to everyone. He'd also managed to share a few drinks with another Centurion who'd been part of the force that had raced to Hogwarts that fateful morning. Hearing the description of what they found in that chamber blew away any residual doubt over Harry's character. Learning too just how highly regarded Harry was considered amongst his fellow Centurions, all would have no qualms about entering a battle with their youngest member by their side. Clinched the matter. "Well met, Centurion. I would like to thank you for the care and hospitality you have shown my daughter. I would also like to thank you for today. This is very generous of you." "Well met, sir. Your daughter is our friend and will always be welcome in any house we own. As for today, that gold was tainted and I wanted nothing to do with it. Only by passing it through the hands of innocence can that gold be cleansed once more. It can also help our nation prosper. Today, visitors from all over the world can see for themselves what this country could be, ending forever whispered half-truths, or downright lies that seem to become more prevalent the further away from London we travel. This will wipe out any remaining Bloodfang influence quicker than young hands can fill those sacks with gold." "I know, sir. Why do you think I did it?" Goldskin thought the Centurion's smile at that was pure goblin. He then watched as they both said goodbye to Sapphire and made their way along the corridor. The bows and salutes both received as they did so left him wondering if it wasn't time to return to Britain. His daughter being close to that couple certainly wouldn't do his family any harm. They passed through the ring of guards, there purely for crowd control. This fortune had been gifted to the nation's children and no self-respecting goblin would ever steal from them. Even the parents of toddlers, those deemed too young to perform the deed themselves, would only take the amount of gold that they could fit in their allocated bag. Making their way over to a goblin both immediately recognized. It was a smiling Barchoke who greeted his children. "Father, how can there be so much gold left if the children have been filling bags all day?" "My daughter, had that been the Potter wealth they would have been filling bags for the next month." Hermione knew the Potters were wealthy, but seeing gold piled up like that was simply mind-blowing. Her father offered an explanation to why there was so much. Harry decreed that all their wealth was to be converted into gold and given away. This meant everything they owned was sold, so today could happen. Normally flooding the market like that would greatly reduce prices. That didn't happen here. Since everyone knew where the money was going, they all insisted on paying a fair price. No goblin would want to steal from children. She watched as they carried their heavy bags of gold along to a row of tellers that would allow them to bank their new wealth, and returned straight back to the end of the queue. The entire event was run with military precision and Hermione realized she should have expected nothing less. Things had run extremely smoothly, pleasing Barchoke no end. What pleased him most, though, was that he would shortly sit down to dinner and spend an evening with his children, that to him was worth more than all the gold that had been dumped here today. The minister couldn't believe how much this bank draft was worth. It would not only add a new wing to St. Mungo's but pay for it to be equipped and staffed too. Amos, though, wanted to know more of the background behind this offer. But Choke had expected nothing else. The ambassador and his assistant were meeting with Arthur, Amelia, Amos, and Cornelius in the minister's office. The minister hadn't said a word since laying eyes on the bank draft Barchoke had presented him with. We have been running an investigation and it would appear Bloodfang's family were a lot smarter than we gave them credit for. That intelligence, though, must have faded through the generations. They had a scheme operating that saw their wealth increasing slowly but surely. It also explains why they were so focused on my son. The ambassador now held everyone's attention, not needing to say that anything being heard here today shouldn't leave the room. The family had an ancient Loki talisman that they had obviously used for generations. Used, though, in a way they had designed to be undetectable to us. When a wizarding family dies out, the contents of their vaults eventually falls to the ministry. With those records no longer being current, they don't require an account manager and are locked away until such time as they reach the agreed-upon time limit of 100 years. Generations of Bloodfang's family have been systematically looting those dead vaults and altering the records, the talisman allowing them to bypass all the safeguards we had in place to prevent this. We have no way of knowing how long this has been going on or much they stole, so that bank draft is merely a gift from an embarrassed nation to its friend who has been wronged by a subject of that nation. Harry decreed that everything they owned would be converted to gold before being given away to our children. Our nation was honor-bound to ensure that happened. Amelia picked up on something, though. You didn't explain why they were so focused on Harry. We think there were two main reasons. Firstly, I don't think I would be breaking any confidentiality agreements if I said that the Potter account is the most senior and prestigious that Gringotts holds. Harry being still alive stopped all that gold from falling into their clutches. Secondly, he's been the catalyst that has brought our nations closer than they've been for centuries. Certainly not something Bloodfang wanted. The ambassador was almost growling as he spoke further on the matter. Their intentions that night were to ritually gut Emma and Dan, ensuring the world knew they had been murdered by goblins. Harry's reaction to that would have revolved entirely around Hermione. I really could see both of my children leaving Britain and all of us behind. Of the present company aside from their father, Bill and Amelia knew the young couple best. Neither could Cario against Barchoke's conclusion. That result would have terrified Cornelius too. He made his thoughts on the entire matter known. Arthur has told us how giving someone's fortune away like this is considered a grave insult amongst your people. This is a punishment we at the ministry fully support. I am also delighted on behalf of the ministry to accept this gift from our goblin friends for St. Mungo's. We will also consider this matter closed and continue moving forward as we have been. I would just like to add a personal note that I am deeply sorry your son was forced to take the actions he did. Thank you, Minister. I too was sorry to see him enter the pit again. My son was right, though. His actions that day made an impression that will protect our family more effectively than a squad of warriors. Here was the opening Amelia was looking for. Speaking of protection, Mad Eye was raving about how quickly both Hermione and Harry could throws of the Imperius. Imagine his surprise when he next returned to Hogwarts to find Padma and Neville now able to do the same. That eye of his soon spotted the devices those two were wearing. My question is whether it would be possible to get any more. Bill raised his sleeve to show he wore a copper bracelet. This is the device you are talking about. It provides a measure of shielding which enables me to fight off the curse. Padma and Neville now have the same, but, like mine, theirs is blood bound to them. I could take this off and pass it to my father and it wouldn't do him one bit of good. Both Padma and Neville are friends of our nation, so there was no problems with them being equipped like this. As my assistant, Mr. William Wesley, also easily qualified, the director is currently considering a proposal that would see similar bracelets worn by others at Hogwarts, Susan, Cedric and a number of Weasleys amongst them. That last bit of news certainly pleased Amelia, though she couldn't totally hide her disappointment at what was a very nice refusal. I know you and your nation are bending over backwards to help us, Barchoke, and please don't think me ungrateful that Susan might have some protection from that vile curse. We lost a lot of good people to that unforgivable last time, and the thought of taking away one of their most potent weapons was certainly appealing. Like your ministry, the director has to balance his response to appease the more hardliners our nation also has. His first priority, though, is to protect Gringotts. Can you imagine what would happen to the bank's reputation if a wizard could cast that vile curse and gain access to any vault they chose? The nation can't risk our protections falling into the hands of others. It isn't just Death Eaters who would like to get past our security. Amos, too, was delighted. His son might have the opportunity to be protected from this curse. Like Amelia, though, he too had seen the devastation this curse had caused in the last war. Rather than attempt to have the entire population protected, he tried to find a middle ground that Ragnarok could justify to his people. The wards around the ministry should help immensely with this problem. I was wondering, though, if it would be possible to offer extra protection to certain key personnel. I'm just thinking back to the tactics they used the last time and wondering how much damage could be done by using that curse on someone like Arthur. The ambassador could see something along those lines being accepted and promised to put their case forward. Tonks felt as if they were at last moving forward. Remus had certainly admitted he would take on a relationship with her in a heartbeat. If it wasn't for his furry little problem, she was trying to make him see that far from hiding things from her, he was more inclined to paint the picture as black as possible. She put it to him that, if his only objection was with a werewolf, it should be her choice if she wanted to see if there could ever be more between them. They were sitting having dinner in the great hall, and her last question seemed to have pierced the defense professor's shields. Sensing he was weakening, Tonks pushed her temporary advantage with a full frontal attack. Next weekend we'll see most of the students head off to Hogsmeade. I intend to see their visit passes as safely as possible. I plan to spend much of this weekend scouting the entire area with a representative of the Goblin forces. I know you're struggling with the whole idea of us forming a relationship, but I have no intention of diving into anything. If you were to come along this weekend, we could make it a double date with Hermione and Harry. You should be safe from me with those two along for protection. The werewolf was left wondering why she couldn't see what was right in front of her eyes. Tonks, you're young, beautiful. Hold our country's top award for bravery and have the entire world at your feet. You could have your pick of any man you wanted. Why would you even be interested in me? Again she had an answer for him, though certainly not one he expected. I'm a metamorphagus, Remus, meaning you could have any woman you wanted. Instead, you have been singularly pursuing an obsession to get to know the real me. Why would you be interested in Nymphadora when Tonks is so much more fun? The marauder thought he was on safer ground here. Remus really should have known better. Tonks is the persona you show the world. Nymphadora is the real you. A young witch I happen to like very much. He'd hoped to make her smile, but this one was almost predatory. And Professor Remus Lupin is the real you. The werewolf is a persona that only has control for one night a month. I certainly think that's a price worth paying to have you in my life. The rest of the time, all I'm asking is that we give each other a chance. Surely you could go that far. She then got to see an emotion that the Aurora didn't understand playing across his features. Tonks could recognize fear when she saw it. She just didn't know what it was doing there. Remus was practically trembling by the time he answered the young witch. Dora, I could easily fall for you. Fall hard. A beautiful smile lit her entire face. Tonks was counting on Remus doing that very thing. Don't worry, Professor Lupin. I'll catch you when you fall. Or is that what you're worried about? Sirius was seated next to Remus and had long given up pretending he wasn't hanging on every word spoken between the two. His laugh at Tonks's last comment proved too much for Remus. Do you mind, Padfoot? Actually, Moony old chum, I do mind. I want my godson and his mate to have some alone time when they visit the village, and not spend the entire day protecting their Uncle Remus from the big bad aura with the pink hair. Henrika was sitting beside Tonks, and it was now her turn to laugh, signaling Remus's defeat. The defense professor decided to stop kidding himself. He was already head over heels for the beautiful Aurora. He just couldn't see how she could possibly be interested in Remus Lupin, and was sure the entire thing would end with him having his heart broken. Not a good condition for a werewolf. Remus had kept to himself for so long the mere thought of sharing his life with someone else terrified him. Peter thought his life was over. The knife at his throat gave a lot of credence to that supposition. When he heard whose hand held that knife, His terror, if anything, intensified. "Well, if it isn't little Peter Pettigrew, what the fuck are you doing here? I better like your answer, or you'll never speak another word." Bella then felt a presence in her head, a presence they'd just spent months searching for. "Ah, Bella, it's so nice to knows. Haven't changed. You're still my little killer, master. Tell Rookwood to come forward. There is no danger for my faithful followers. Here. Hey lover, you can come out now. Our master's here." Suspecting a trap, Augustus had held back to provide cover for his mate if she needed it. Hearing that their master was present, saw him entering the small forest clearing where their search had led them. The very large snake that rose out of the grass to face him originally caused alarm. That was until he noticed the red eyes. He felt his master enter his mind and offered no resistance. To attempt to do so would surely lead to pain. Voldemort was working his way through his servants' memories, and not liking what he found there. He couldn't fault their actions. Even Rookwood tricking Bella into blood bonding with him. Won Voldemort's approval. They would never have made it off the island otherwise. Bella killing Lucius saved him a task, and Augustus was a much better match for his little killer than that fool she was forced to marry. He too was apparently able to exert a modicum of control over her psychopathic tendencies. He needed to accelerate his plans and gain a new body as quickly as possible. Thankfully, having two of his finest Death Eaters to assist him should make that possible. Voldemort pushed what he wanted done into his servant's mind. This process was a lot less taxing for him than having to describe it step by step. It was still a very tired snake who made its way to sleep beside the warmth of the fire Wormtail had going. The transfer process was also very taxing for the person receiving those instructions. An exhausted Augustus sank to his knees and would have toppled if a quick-thinking Bella hadn't caught him. Peter found himself being press-ganged into helping get Rookwood over to the fire. Bella then used a sleeping bag and they lowered him down onto it. She was then a hive of activity, using his fire and supplies from their pack to quickly whip up some sort of meal. Watching as she then spoon-fed this concoction to a clearly exhausted Rookwood was another big shock for Peter. A domesticated Bellatrix Lestrange was hard to believe. She could see the color returning to her mate's features, and brewed the last of their coffee to help that process along. Augustus may be trying to teach her to be more patient, but Bella was desperate to discover what their master had to say. The snake was already curled up asleep. Augustus felt the food and coffee reviving him, at least to the point where he could tell Bella what just happened. He handed her the cup still half full of coffee, earning him a kiss of thanks. "Peter, I would like to thank you for taking care of our master. No one else appears to give a fuck. He told me you have gathered all the ingredients for the ritual next week, all except one. Bella will deal with that, and I will now brew the potion. I am a better brewer than you." Peter was nodding like a madman at that. Rather than being upset or jealous, he would have done practically anything to escape having to prepare that potion. Our master can now see he needs to make his return to Britain as quickly as possible, and that Halloween will only be but a step on this journey. We are to take him and Nagini to a cemetery outside a village called Little Hangleton, where on the night of the winter solstice, we will perform another ritual that will see our master back with us once more. Then he will summon his Death Eaters, and see who answers his call and who dares to oppose him. Bella still had loads of questions, but could see she wouldn't be getting any more answers out of her mate tonight. He simply couldn't stay awake any longer. She placed her sleeping bag next to her mate's before realizing there was someone else she could get some answers from. Peter telling her that the missing ingredient needed for the ritual was a baby didn't bother her in the slightest. Bella would gladly give up a child of her own to see her master return. Peter was soon the only one still awake as Bella wrapped herself around Rookwood and slept. He was sitting there staring into the flames and wondering if his life had just taken an upturn or was on a downward spiral. Not having to steal a baby and prepare it for the ritual was certainly a plus in his book. Having to be around Bellatrix Lestrange 24 hours a day was a danger he could have done without. One wrong word, a wrong reaction, or just being there at the wrong time could see him end up dead. Bella would think no more of ending his life than she would snuffing out a candle before she went to bed. That Rookwood appeared to have some sort of relationship with the crazy witch shocked Peter. He had always thought Rookwood was one of the most intelligent of the Death Eaters. It just proved that even the most intelligent of wizards could let their thinking be influenced by their head without a brain. No one could deny that the witch in question was gorgeous, that beauty though came with a thirst for blood and causing others pain that only their master could possibly match. A first date with Bella might be all you got. There was always a chance you wouldn't be around for a second. It was a delighted Tonks, who set off with Remus for their first official date. Hermione was also hyper too, especially since Harry had kept today's visit to the village a secret. They had their usual lesson with Bill this morning, and it wasn't until that was over Harry asked his mate if she wanted to have lunch in Hogsmeade. They would have lunch together and discuss the best way to use the auras and warriors that would be here next weekend. The four would then scout around the village and study the route down from the castle to see if they could spot any potential ambush spots. Remus found himself enjoying what was effectively a working lunch, where all four offered suggestions as a rough plan began to take shape. Tonks' suggestion that they would probably have to do the same again tomorrow to refine the plan was met with 3 grins, that even spending hours routing through the village's back alleys and surrounding countryside couldn't wipe off. Tonks, though, had to veto Sirius's suggestion of making sure Harry got some alone time with Hermione. She was still his minder and wasn't for letting him out of her sight. They had no way of knowing that the danger they were getting prepared to defend against was currently over 2,000 miles away. That danger, though, would soon be heading in their direction.